So we do take care to maintain your privacy, but if you're in the public gallery or submitting a question, you may also be recorded. In fact, if you're asking a question, you will definitely be recorded, and that's also for our records. Nalakadich wajak mort kan kadak nidja walilap budja, where jinang wajak kadajin, where knitting bula yeye. We acknowledge the Wajak people as the traditional owners of the Greater Fremantle Walyalup area, and we recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. Attendance, apologies, leaves of absence. I know that Councillor Lang and Councillor Thompson are both running late for meetings and because of a flight, I think, that was delayed in leaving. So we are expecting both of them within the half hour. Applications for leave of absence. I have one in front of me from Councillor Sullivan requesting a leave of absence from 10 November to 22 November and from 14 December to 20 December. Can I move them together? Yep, so I'll move those together and get a seconder for that from Councillor Moughlin. All those in favour? Yep, that's unanimous. Are there any other applications for leaves of absence? All good? No. Okay, do we have any disclosures of interest by members? Just get you to put your microphone on, Councillor Archibald.
Yes, I'd like to disclose an interest in the planning item 2210-1, which is the Swanbourne Street item. I know the residents who live in the adjacent property, and so it's an impartiality interest, but I will remain in the chamber and vote on the item.
Thanks, Councillor Archibald. Councillor Pemberton?
Thank you. I will disclose an interest in item FPOL 7, the Swan River Crossing, as I am an employee of the Department of Transport. I will remain in the chamber and debate.
That's an impartiality. Yep. Okay, Councillor Kamada?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to declare an interest in FPOL 5, the Fremantle Boat and Seafood Festival. I'm employed in the rock lobster industry.
So that's a financial interest, and you will leave the chamber? Yep, no worries. Councillor Graham, are you flashing lights at me? Thank you, I think. Anyone over here? We're all good? Okay, great. Right. Responses to previous public questions taken on notice. There are responses published in the agenda for the meeting, the questions taken on notice on 28th of September at the ordinary meeting of council. This is going to bring us to public question time. Most of you, I believe, have been here before and you know the drill. So it's 3 minutes. Because it's council, we're pretty strict on the 3 minutes. We don't really go beyond that, and you'll hear a little beep beep to let you know that the 3 minutes is up. We ask you to speak into the microphone. I have had some people come through kind of as a group, so I'm going to do that group in the order that they've requested it. But I'm going to start basically in the order of the agenda with a petitioner, Jemima Delaney, and then I'll go through pretty much in the order of the agenda for the various people who want to ask questions or say things. So, Jemima Delaney. We'll be gentle.
Thank you.
I'm going to say no. It's warming up. It's not very nice that we try this out on you the first time you come here, is it?
It's fine. Thank you.
Great.
Good evening, Mayor Fitzharding, councillors and friends. My name is Jemima Delaney and I'm the initiator of the petition to introduce traffic calming on Bromley Road in Hilton. I have lived in Hilton for almost 9 years and my husband has lived here for 13 years. In that time, we have seen a dramatic change in Thanks. Okay. In that time, I have seen a dramatic change in the profile of the suburb, with a lot more young families, as well as a noticeable increase in the number of people generally, owing to the amount of new dwellings via subdivisions. This means more cars driving on the roads, more cars parked on streets and verges, and more people out and about walking with kids and dogs to parks, schools, daycares, etc. This petition is supported by the mums and dads and kids who live on Bromley Road and the surrounding streets of Hilton. Like many other parts of Hilton, we are lucky on Bromley Road to have a lovely little community of children who play together after school and on weekends. While the kids are riding their bikes and scooters down the footpath, playing on the communal trampoline, drawing with chalk on the driveways, or climbing and swinging from the trees, things we all agree kids should be able to do freely and safely, they are always supervised by an adult. I have spent many afternoons and evenings outside weeding my verge while keeping an eye on the kids, or standing with other parents watching our children play, and have been completely overwhelmed at the speeds of the cars going past. Unfortunately, at some times, cars travelling at a safe speed seem to be in the minority. Bromley Road is a long and straight road which makes it easy for cars to gain momentum, and at the southern end there is a crest which reduces visibility, increasing the danger in this area. Over the years, we have noticed traffic speeds getting worse and have speculated that this may be due to commuters diverting to Bromley Road as a rat run between South Street and Winterfold Road since the central median strip and trees were introduced on Colic Street. While collecting signatures for this petition, many people commented that Colic Street is now a less attractive route because if they get stuck behind a bus, there is no safe way to overtake. And others have said that now the road feels too narrow. These comments, as well as our anecdotal evidence of witnessing the same cars speeding at peak times, i.e. probably commuters, supports our theory. It is not just cars, we've also noticed heavy and commercial vehicles travelling at unsafe speeds. Food delivery trucks, rubbish trucks, construction vehicles, large tradie utes and the like. The obvious issue is for these vehicles, the stopping distance is longer and the risk of a serious accident is increased. On behalf of the signatories, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to present the petition and for your time and attention tonight. And a very special thank you to Ben Lorver for all his support and assistance. We look forward to hearing back from the Council in regards to this issue.
Thank you. And I understand Councillor Lorver is going to present that when we get to petitions a little bit later on. Councillor Groom, I believe you're also presenting a petition, and I'll just check in with you to see if you can see anyone in the gallery who might be there for your petition. Not a problem. We shall receive their petition nonetheless. Thank you for that. So then the next item on the agenda in terms of the questions is the planning item. We've got two people listed to speak for that. The first one on the list is Mike Beer.
I'd like to thank the councillors and mayor and staff for their time. I'm speaking on behalf of the renovations to 59 Swanbourne Street. I've worked closely with the City Planning Department and addressed all the issues that were raised with regards to the R codes and the overlooking issues. The property has approximately 7 extensions on it going back to the early 70s. They don't have any records before that. I think there was a couple more done before that. It's not heritage listed and built with several different types of materials. The issue on the table is the open space issue. However, with the addition of the outdoor living area on the upper floor, the open space issue is resolved as per the R codes. Under the R codes, under open space, a general area of a lot not occupied by any building and includes .1 open areas of accessible and usable flat roofs and outdoor living areas above natural ground level. I would ask the councillors to vote in favour of the project as all aspects of the R codes are met. I thank you for your time and I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you. We will go to the second person on that item, which is Susan Green.
Hello, if I could start first just by introducing myself before I actually start on this. I'm Susan Green, and I live at 29 Stephen Street with my husband Jeremy, and we are located next to the 59 Swanbourne Street, which is the subject of this development application. Okay. At the last Planning Committee meeting, Andrew Sullivan gave his views on the design of the proposed development, and this is what he said, I quote, "It puts the very offending part of the building on the neighbours, right where it's worst. It's right where it's going to have the greatest impact on the neighbours to the west and the neighbours to the south," unquote. Few would disagree. This design flies in the face of the recommendations of the R codes. The guidelines talk about privacy design in relation to planning outdoor living areas more than half a metre above ground level. They say such areas should be regarded as habitable rooms and designed, I quote, "to minimise overlooking of neighbouring properties," unquote. Yet this plan has a 7.5 metre long deck overlooking most of our back garden and recreational space, which clearly runs counter to the guidelines. The guidelines also explain how overlooking from quiet areas like bedrooms and studios can be more easily tolerated than overlooking from active areas. They say, and I quote again, "Of most concern are active habitable spaces, for example, living rooms, kitchens, activity rooms, balconies, and outdoor living areas that are higher than half a metre above natural ground level." In another example of disregard for the R codes, in the design of the proposed development, these spaces, the family room, dining room, and kitchen, all active habitable spaces, overlook or directly access the deck that overlooks our property. These spaces will form the hub of a 5-bedroom household with all the movement and noise that entails. The roof deck is located just 2 metres from our boundary and 6.5 metres from our primary outdoor living space. The guidelines also describe how outdoor spaces such as ours should be dealt with, and I quote again, "Those outdoor areas likely to be occupied for extended periods of time and where it's reasonable to expect a relatively high degree of privacy should be the focus of attention in terms of any restrictions to be applied to overlooking from adjoining properties," unquote. While the privacy screen is now 1.6 metres, this still doesn't give us security that we cannot be overlooked. It won't stop above average height people, and that's 50% of the population, from seeing into our garden. Due to the positioning of the habitable living spaces, potential overlooking, and scale of the proposed development, we request the Council to require the height of the privacy barrier be increased to 1.8 metres. As well as preventing overlooking, this will provide us with additional buffering from the prospective activity and noise characteristic of a large household. The R codes say that where screening devices are necessary, they are to be, and I quote, "at least 1.6 metres in height, at least 75% obscure, permanently fixed, and restrict view in the direction of overlooking any adjoining property," unquote. This implies that 1.6 metre is the minimum height required, that it can be more. We also suggested that a solid wall would mitigate the impact of having a large household hub close by and provide a buffer from noise and movement, but the applicant rejected the idea. We do request, however, that the screening material be opaque and without gaps.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you for listening to me.
And my apologies, we do have one more person on that item, Pierre Horvitz.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the council meeting. My name is Pierre Horwitz. I'm a professor of environmental science at Edith Cowan University, and I live at 61 Swanbourne Street. It is our view, the view of myself and my partner, that the open space should be maintained at the deemed to comply level of 45%, and we form this view based on the absence of any reasonable need to go beyond it. There is, in our opinion, nothing about the site, nothing intrinsic about the block that warrants a contravention of the deemed to comply level. In fact, the reverse is the case. The block at 59 Swanbourne Street is very similar in size to the 3 other neighbouring blocks on Stephen Street to its west, all of which have substantially achieved open space compliance. To its south, at least 5 successive properties have achieved compliance as well. In this respect, we regard the officer's comment on the matter regarding an eclectic mix in the neighbourhood is in error. This development will be the odd one out. The impact of contravening the 45% open space level are significant. The extra bulk increases by that amount. The building becomes more so out of character with the immediate neighbourhood, as I've just mentioned, the housing on Stevens Street and Swanbourne Street. And we note that open space is not just required for the resident, it's required for the immediate neighbourhood. And we see the loss of open space as serious in this regard. It contributes to a greater thermal mass, or it would contribute to a greater thermal mass in a planning era where we should be seeking to decrease urban heat island effects in this zone. The officer's comment that the loss of space is somehow compensated by an upstairs balcony is, in this regard, bewildering on several grounds. It's part of the thermal mass of the building, and secondly, it impacts more upon the visual and other amenities of neighbouring properties, and much more so than open space would achieve. Indeed, we don't understand why a lean-to, partially enclosed veranda on the ground floor of the existing building can be regarded as a footprint of the existing building and thereby part of its block, and yet the veranda on the second floor of the proposed bulky building can be regarded as open space or in lieu of it. It just doesn't make sense. Open space requirements are there for a neighbourhood reason, and we request that Council do not grant an exemption from them in this or other similar cases. Thank you.
And thank you. Now we're going to go to the South Beach facilities item, and I've got Louise Ainsworth listed to speak on that. And Louise, I believe you have a handout for elected members, which I'm happy for the team to distribute.
Yes, if you could distribute those, that would help. So my name is Louise Ainsworth. I'm here to talk about the South Beach facilities. I was, or am, if it still exists, a member of the reference group. I'm a committee member of the Fremantle Masters Swimming Club. The coordinator of the Fremantle Port Swim Through. I'm also an architect. And I represent almost 700 swimmers in that capacity. And swimmers spend a lot of time in change rooms. And my comments relate mostly to the general male and female change room areas at each end of the breezeway. So the last communication that the reference group had was an online workshop in March, and that meeting concluded with a configuration for the change rooms of 2 open showers, 2 closed. I think it's option 1 in the design report. And we said, yeah, that looks okay, subject to additional bench space. Now, change room floors are always wet, so bench space is precious real estate. If you take one thing away from this meeting and my comments, you can never have enough bench space. Fast forward to October, I get an email from Councillor Groom to say that a plan was not going to FPOL, it had gone to FPOL. No update for the reference group, no idea this item being considered in June, and nothing on my say. But I'm here now, and I've spoken to club members and swimmers about your option 3. The good news is we support the addition of the changing place, of course. The general layout looks good, it saves the tree. The bad news is the layout of the change rooms is virtually unusable. So if you look at page 1, I've put some red lines on there and some notes. The male and female are the same. There are 4 closed cubicles when 2 is plenty, very little open changing area, limited bench space. Not sure where the footbath has gone. Maybe it's just not, I can't see it on the drawing. I don't know how the capacity has been worked out, but what I see on that plan, the existing change rooms are a much better fit. And you can also see into the ladies from the breezeway, which is totally unacceptable. So the report says that option 3 plan is generally consistent with the community engagement. So from the point of view of the change rooms, it is not. And I wanted to know how many of you have seen the movie filmed locally, How to Please a Woman. The change room scenes filmed at Leighton change rooms are very realistic. It's a highly social space. And we talked about in the reference group meetings
And I had several separate conversations with Bernard Sieber about that, who was also a swimmer. But your option 3 doesn't allow for any of that. It completely misses the brief. And I went through the handout. I've just heard the bell there. There's an option 2 in the design report. Option 2 is a far better change room layout and also allows for the open roof. So on behalf of the swimmers and change room users, please do not approve option 3 plan as presented. Reconsider option 2. And if you are absolutely wedded to option 3, please reconfigure the change rooms and fix the sight lines. I have drawn that up for you, so problem solved, no charge.
Thanks a lot. I'm going to have to get more and more strict on the time, I'm afraid. So that's going to take us through to, I believe everyone else listed was to speak on the bridge item. The only one I think I wasn't clear on was Jeremy Flynn. So Jeremy, if you're speaking on something that's not the bridge, you might want to jump up now. Otherwise, you can hold fire until we get through this list. So I will start with Ian Kerr, and I'll work through the list that you've given me, and I've added anyone else who's listed their name for this item at the end of that.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. And first, I'd like to thank Council and officers for translating and simplifying the broad-ranging discussion and resolution of the FPOL Committee into what is a coherent and constructive way forward. However, as someone who spent much of his professional career in policy, programme and project evaluation, I know that this is just the first part of a long and sometimes difficult process. Multi-criteria assessment is not a simple recipe. I'm sure that those of you who are familiar with it will know that. It takes time and it takes engagement to get right. The principles and objectives that are set out in the attachment to the agenda are in themselves pretty good. There are some gaps in them, but they are not themselves criteria. So we need to be able to define, confirm, and add or delete criteria before we can get into the assessment stage, including their relative importance with the community. Some will inevitably be far more important than others. We won't all agree on the criteria, nor on the assessment of them. But the great value of multi-criteria analysis is that if you have a broad range of criteria, the results are often remarkably robust. It is also important that assessment itself is a collective endeavour, as broadly inclusive as the range of criteria. Whilst the officer emphasis on engagement, discussion and feedback with the community is welcome, I wonder whether we should perhaps reconvene the community forum from October-November 2020 for in-depth involvement, as these people are already well informed about the project and much of its history. In terms of point 5 in the officer's alternative recommendation, I would add that Council should perhaps reserve the option to carry out with the community its own comparative assessment of options if Main Roads and the Alliance do not do so satisfactorily. I believe there is sufficient knowledge, expertise, information amongst councillors, amongst council staff and amongst the Fremantle community to do that in a very worthwhile way. Another big issue is traffic. And we should note that Main Roads itself has cast doubt on the existing traffic volume data, and these doubts will only be exacerbated when projecting into the future. Main Roads' approach to traffic modelling and road planning, sometimes called predict and provide, is not 21st century best practice in any case. Put simply, predicting the future from the present, or more accurately from the past, which is all we have data on, will simply give us more of what we have, including congestion. If you doubt that, just look at the Mitchell Freeway, where every time a lane is added, congestion seems to re-emerge, and soon there is pressure to add yet another lane. And if that's not the case, it simply moves congestion further along the freeway. Predict and provide has more generally been replaced by the need to identify where we want to be before we can work out how best to get there. And I think the City of Fremantle is well placed with a number of strategic documents to be in that position. As David Engwick said in his 1993 Mears oration to the Disability Advisory Council of Australia, to bring about change, we need to project ourselves into the future and look back to where we now are, and we may well see paths that are not obvious to us in the present. More prosaically, if madness is doing the same thing time and time again, expecting a different outcome, predict and provide is surely insanity in a world that requires us to change for various reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Barnes.
Kaya, I'm Lisa Barnes and I live on South Terrace. This evening I'm here to talk to you about the power of place. The City of Fremantle's Strategic Community Plan talks about Fremantle being a destination city. We want people to stop and linger rather than move through. You know you've entered Fremantle when you cross the river, you see the containbow, or you meander along the river under the bridges. These iconic entries are Fremantle. They are home. They are release. Studies have shown that the one thing that makes people feel negatively about a city is a constant sense of being lost or disoriented. To be connected to a place, you need familiarity and to understand how things relate to each other spatially. Disrupting our entryways will create confusion and heighten anxiety, particularly for our visitors. Changing the iconic entries will alter people's sense of space and their perception of Fremantle, and this is exactly what the current proposal from Main Roads is seeking to do. Our integrated transport strategy aims to support a shift away from car to the more sustainable modes of transport. The focus on effective bike infrastructure in this location, the new bridge, assumes a good connection across the river to the PSP on Curtin Avenue, and that its feeder roads such as East Street, Burt Street, Riverside Road and Beach Street, need to be free-flowing for bikes and not choked up with cars. Yet here this main road solution is clearly prioritising the free flow of motorised vehicles over all other movement. Its poor connection from north to east will push motorised vehicles into our side streets and impact the rideability, the sense of place and the sense of community within those streets. Creating poorly planned main road solutions that knowingly send cars into side streets not only creates less safe commuter trails for cyclists, it actively destroys community as people seek to avoid the bustle. Instead of living in their front yards and engaging with their street, riding or walking in the local area and being a vital part of their local community, people will shrink back, get in their car more often as it's safer, and retreat to the quieter spaces of their homes. The Main Roads proposal to put 6 lanes of traffic into just 2 on the river and Beach Street will create pressure points that release points that will undoubtedly impact on East Street and the young families of Burt Street, plus many other roads in their vicinity. These areas have major infill developments pending, and the successful integration of these new developments into the community, both socially and spatially, will largely be reliant on the sense of place that this area has. Professor Peter Newman says that the solution to traffic is not just to create better movement for cars, but to better enable movement that creates place. Movement and place was initiated in London and has been adopted eagerly by other great cities.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks. Gina Blakemore.
Good evening, my name is Gina Blakemore, South Fremantle resident. My role here tonight is to talk about the beautiful and rare Beach Street green space. According to the 2014 Urban Forest of Perth mapping, Fremantle is one of the lowest rated urban forests, between 5 to 10%. An urban forest comprises of all trees and other vegetation within the city and the soil and the water that supports it. This includes vegetation in parks, gardens, river embankments and community gardens. We know that Fremantle Council is trying to meet its tree planting targets and to create a cooler climate in the face of climate change. Small newly planted trees below the 3-metre height mark are not to be considered urban tree canopy. Anything below this does not remove substantial carbon dioxide and store carbon as a mature tree would. Taller, more mature trees provide shade, block the sun's rays, cool concrete by 1 to 2 degrees, and mitigate the urban heat island effect. Yet 100 or more trees of all sizes will be in the way of the current Canning Highway redevelopment project area and will be scheduled for removal. This contradicts the spirit of what we in Fremantle are trying to achieve, that is more tree canopy. We are heading into uncharted territory with climate change, so establishment and growth of new trees will not be easy. If we remove old trees, there won't be any left in our city. Yes, it is good for us to plant more trees for our urban target, but not remove established trees and expect to replace them with baby trees and bushes, given the continuing loss of vegetation to urbanisation and infill development. Proposed planting can be done alongside keeping mature vegetation. Point 2 of Fremantle's urban forest plan is protect the existing and future urban forests from economic and environmental threat. Keeping mature trees will also save money, as Benara Nursery estimates it costs $30,000 per tree throughout its life. The urban forest plan states that we need to a coordinated approach to maintain and increase the city's canopy cover. As the number of extreme heat days increase annually and average temperatures continue to rise, cooling our cities is increasingly important for public health. An urban forest provides our community with critical ecosystem services such as air filtration, shade, cooling, habitat, oxygen and carbon sequestration. Fremantle's community vision process aims for a sustainable, livable and vibrant place over the coming decades. The city's green spaces and places describes the responsibility to protect and enhance the natural environment, green spaces and heritage features of Fremantle. Beach Street has one of the largest continuous areas of tree coverage in Fremantle. It is clear on Google Earth. It is an area of natural beauty which will be eliminated with the current main roads and state government proposal. We need to conserve the mature tree canopy we already have. It is enjoyed by visitors, residents, cyclists and pedestrians. Will our city allow for the removal of 50-year-old plus trees and destruction of the iconic cliffs they grow in, on and around? And finally, why should this idyllic, peaceful river shore be raised for more road, bitumen and heat for a Canning Highway diversion that simply does not need to happen?
Thanks, Dina. Pippa Hurst.
Hello everyone. I'm Pippa Hurst. I'm a Fremantle resident and the founder and chair of Design Freo. I have grave concerns about the realignment of the Canning Highway and the impact that it's going to have on our unique sense of place and specifically on the northern entry to the city. And I'd like to tell a story. Some years ago, a friend of mine told me she was driving across the old bridge with 2 teenage boys in the back of the car, and anyone who's spent any time with teenage boys will know they're not prone to public expressions of emotion. She was returning one of the boys to his father's house in Fremantle after he'd spent a week at his mother's house north of the river, and as they drove over the bridge, she heard him let out a loud sigh and say, "Ah, Fremantle." I'm sure many of you are familiar with that feeling. What the boy was experiencing as they drove over the bridge and as he looked out to the tree-lined limestone ridge was a powerful sense of place. Sorry, I'll have to stand back a bit. The Alliance's reports are full of numbers. We can measure how many cars there are and how many square metres of open space there is and how fast everyone is travelling. What we can't measure is our experience of the place and the intangibles that go with it. We measure what we think might be gained, but how do we measure what is lost, and where does that appear in all of the reports? Just 1 year ago, the Fremantle Biennale chose the theme crossing and commissioned a number of site-specific artworks that respond to the foreshore between the Old Bridge and the Stirling Bridge. And this beautiful book here captures that work and contains love letters to that special place. One of those artworks was Gathering Place, and next week the creators of the work, architects Penhale and Winter and Wandjak Noongar elder Sandra Harbin, will be in Sydney where the work is shortlisted for a National Architecture Award. The work positioned a winding seat structure below the Moreton Bay Fig, you may have seen it, and it asked people to sit and reflect and listen to the land. And I'm going to read you a short excerpt from the text that was on the chair where people were sitting. Dragonflies hovering, seagulls overhead, boats moving up the river, she-oak needles, dancing shadows, voices from above and below. Kwapara Buja, beautiful country. Dabakan Kurlini, Dabakan Kurlini, Dabakan Kurlini. Walk slowly, walk quietly, walk softly. Buja Wakanini. The land is speaking. Nainini, Ni, and Katich.
sit, listen, and learn. We can build, how tragic that space is due to be flattened and replaced with a road. We can build bridges and roads and buildings, and we can take them down and build them again. But once raised, that limestone escarpment and everything that goes with it's not coming back. The separation between the busy road above and the peaceful river below will be gone forever and replaced by what? I'm yet to see an accurate or detailed representation of what is proposed. I think it's critical that we're provided with VR technology that is standard practice in architecture practices everywhere so that we can actually appreciate what it's going to feel like on the ground, because I don't think anyone looking at those plans can understand that. So what we build reflects what we value.
Thank you.
I ask what we value.
Sally Matthews.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm bringing the point of view from the not so far east. I'm a resident of East Fremantle, and I've also would like to represent the community of Bicton and Attadale, who we've spoken with on a number of occasions regarding this issue, which is the realignment of Canning Highway down to the river's edge. Keep Beach Street access to Fremantle. We strongly urge the City of Fremantle to keep the Beach Street access to Fremantle, this delightful suburban meander into Fremantle for the Eastern Fremantle community. This riverside drive extending to Bicton and Attadale connects these local areas and is an iconic, scenic and slow river journey along the shared space culminating in the arrival at the Fremantle Centre. And perspective of the town of East Fremantle. You may be aware that the town of East Fremantle Council on the 18th of October unanimously passed a motion to seek immediate and ongoing consultation with Main Roads over ongoing concerns raised by the council in July, with the proposed stopping of Beach Street through access to Fremantle, as well as the impacts of traffic movements into the Plympton ward and the George Street precinct. In short, East Fremantle Council's concerns align with ours, SOS Fremantle, in regards to the proposed realignment of Canning Highway, a major road to the river's edge. How can this align with the progressive council's environmental priorities? The river foreshore is a sensitive space where the water meets the land. Wouldn't it be a great outcome if the river was given the breathing space it deserves to ebb and flow on a planted sandy foreshore, rather than a concrete block retaining wall for a busy road? I wonder which is the more befitting gateway for the City of Fremantle. Thank you.
Margaret Kerr.
Most of us would have heard the quote from philosopher George Santayana that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Tonight I want to ask you to remember Gilbert Fraser. We are having this conversation tonight because in the late 1930s, Gilbert Fraser made a mistake. Gilbert Fraser entered the WA Parliament in May 1928. At that point, he was the youngest member of any parliament in Australia. He served as a member of the Legislative Council for West Province until his death in Fremantle Hospital on the 1st of November 1958. For the last year of his life, he continued to serve even though he had been diagnosed with throat cancer and had to use a speech amplifier. He was Deputy Chair of Committees from 1936 to 1952. Chief Secretary and Minister for Local Government and Town Planning from 1953 until his death, Leader of the Government in the Legislative Council from the 7th of December 1955 until his death, Father of the House and his longest serving member from May 1954 until his death. It's an amazing record of service. In Fremantle, he is remembered as president of the North Fremantle Amateur Football Club from 1932 until 1958. And as you all know, Gilbert Fraser Reserve and Grandstand are named in his honour. At the time he entered Parliament in 1928, a debate was already in progress about the need to replace the ageing 1866 traffic bridge. Gilbert Fraser reported that from his home in Ainsley Road in North Freo, he could hear every car that crossed the bridge. He was part of several delegations arguing unsuccessfully for a new bridge to rival the Harbour Bridge in Sydney. On the 5th of August 1952, Gilbert Fraser made a comment in Parliament that is very telling in the light of that long life of service. Talking of the location of our current bridges, he said, "I was hoping that we would eventually have something substantial there. The only thing I regret in my public life is that I was one of the representatives of the Fremantle district who agreed with the Minister for Works in the Depression years to a wooden structure for the Fremantle traffic bridge. We were told at that time that it would last for 20 years and that it could be built for a sum that would amount to 2 years' interest on the cost of a steel bridge. We weakened and allowed it to be built. We were informed that at the end of the 20-year period, a new steel bridge could be constructed. Gilbert Fraser regretted having listened to the limited vision of the bureaucrats when he should have listened to the wider vision and aspirations of the people he so faithfully represented.
Thank you, Margaret.
I urge you not to make the same mistake."
And Richard Evans.
Hi, thanks for having me speak again to the council. I'm Richard Evans. My family own property at North Fremantle. I'm also the co-founder of the Save the Bridge Alliance. I've kind of been involved in that for the last 16, 18 months, I'd say, since the announcement back in August last year. It's been an interesting journey for me. I've met so many wonderful people, including councillors and spoken to people and politicians and members of the public and celebrities and engineers and people who are involved in the construction of the strengthening of the bridge, and even main roads people at the community consultations. And nothing that I've heard from any of these people has led me to believe that the bridge can't be saved. We obtained the engineering report through Freedom of Information, and we have a plan for the bridge, which is kind of outlined elsewhere, but I won't go into those at the moment. I just really want to thank the council for kind of standing up to main roads. It's been an interesting journey, and I feel like when they came up with this Canning Highway realignment, and we fully support our 10,000 people signatures, fully support what Gina and Lisa and Ian are doing with the Save Our Shore. We're going to let our supporters know that. I think it's a very big deal. We would love to see at the end of the day that it all get put back on the drawing board, that we can kind of talk about the bridge and we can talk with other people and do a feasibility study about saving it and all the costs and set up as a not-for-profit and all these different things that I've spoken about before. But I think at the moment, it's really just standing up to main roads and pushing back. And look what happened with Row 8. That was a fait accompli, and everybody thought you'd never stop that. And they managed to stop that, and it was a wonderful campaign. And I think this is the same kind of thing. I think there's enough strength and determination in this room from the councillors and also the public. I feel like this is, like I said at the last meeting, the finance meeting, this is the tip of the iceberg. I think people only get more focused as you get closer to the pointy edge of construction and stuff. I feel like people, once you start, putting concreting or even cutting down trees, that people get very focused on this, and I think you won't quite realise the anger that will come out. I've been amazed by how quickly it turned after the plans were released, how quickly in a week or two from doing a little brief talk at politics in the pub to actually having our politics in the pub within those 4 weeks, it was palpable, the anger in the community. That there wasn't really there for the bridge or other things. I think people thought they were going to get a Sydney Harbour Bridge, but they didn't, and they kind of weren't happy with the design. So anyway, just want to let you know the saving the Freo traffic bridge is still on the table, but we support what these guys are doing. Thanks.
Thank you. And Jeremy Flynn. No problem, thanks. All right, so that brings us to the end of public question time. And I note Councillor Lang has joined us. Looks like Councillor Thompson is still making his way here. Welcome, Councillor Lang. All right, we have two petitions. Councillor Groom, you've got a petition to present and no microphone. Oh, you might have that one back now.
Yep, thank you. It gives me delight to present a petition about Manila Avenue that we will soon see has a theme. We have a theme of petitions tonight. So this one relates to traffic calming on Manila Avenue in White Gum Valley. Council put in a small pocket park on Manila Avenue several years ago. There is a lane that joins Manila Avenue at the edge of that park, and that's proving to be really unsafe in terms of kids running to the park with some excitement and a fairly blind intersection of traffic coming out and not expecting kids at that space. So the residents have some pretty simple suggestions for how we could calm traffic at that intersection, and so we've got a petition signed by 18 of the residents that live in and around that area. And I think it's worth commenting on the community that has grown around that park and particularly in that street, so much so that residents have pooled money to buy a trampoline that's on a verge that is now an extension of the pocket park and shared by kind of kids in the area with some delight. So I'm happy to put that on the table, and I think that our officers will have little difficulty in finding some pretty low cost and simple solutions to respond to it.
Thank you, Councillor Groom. And Councillor Lorber.
Yes, I also have a petition dealing with traffic calming, but on Bromley Road, and Jemima really stated the concerns they have very, very well. There's 55 signatures on this petition, and like Councillor Groom said, there is a bit of a concern about increased traffic and traffic going fast on down Bromley Road. And when I was doorbelling last year, out talking with everybody, there was a trampoline on the verge, and there were just kids hanging out on it and chatting just about every time that I would go up and down that road. I know some of us are more familiar with this part of Hilton than others, but it's a little kind of cut off road from Colic Street. So if we could at least investigate to see how fast traffic is going up and down that road, and then there might be some pretty common sense solutions to actually calm what traffic is there. So I'd like to present that on behalf of the residents.
Thanks, Councillor Lorber. All right, we don't have any deputations or special deputations that I know about. I have a couple of things for presentations. We received an award at the Property Council of Australia, shiny award, for the best mixed use development it was awarded to us and to Serona for the combined FOMO and Walyalup Civic Centre Walyalup Court development, and it was a really significant acknowledgement of the change that development has had and precipitated across the area. Not only did we get some nice recognition up on the stage, but also a lot of people coming up and acknowledging how much they think Fremantle has changed and how that development has really shifted a few things in the middle of town. So that was a really nice award, and I'd like to acknowledge that this work started a long time ago, well before my time. There's councillors here, particularly, I look at Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Thompson, who've been around, Councillor Pemberton, who've been around this for a significant period of time, probably Councillor Jones, I shouldn't name people because then I get myself in trouble, but who really held the course through, a really difficult project, and it has had significant impacts for the city. Also the staff who, have guided this project to its conclusion. So that was really nice recognition. The other thing I attended recently was the launch of the 20 Lives, 20 Homes evaluation report. So you'll recall the City of Fremantle is a partner in this project. It was initiated out of some conversations that were happening between police, the city, St Pat's about what do we do about, homelessness and the impacts in the city. And what it sought to do was fund people to get into permanent housing. 29 people were helped through the 20 Lives, 20 Homes project, so above the 20 that was the initial target. And what was interesting, 23 were housed at the end of the project, a large majority of those in their own home, but a number in boarding houses. And what was something I learned was that boarding houses for some people are actually a preferred solution. They would prefer to be in that kind of shared style accommodation, whereas I think we've traditionally thought of them as being more transitory. So that's kind of an interesting takeaway. The other bit that was absolutely palpable learning about the report was just the significance of having the wraparound services, and how for all of those people who were housed, it was because of an individual or a group of individuals who supported them in that. And they, all of them said that was the absolute game changer for them. So I commend the report to you. I think it's available online, but I'll also circulate it to elected members and leave it in the elected members area if anyone wants to have a read, because it's really good news. And it's also given rise to a complete change in strategy, I guess, from the state government and all the providers through to the housing first kind of strategy. So it's involved in the Zero project. So those were two significant presentations recently. I don't think anyone has told me they've got anything to add to that, so I'll keep moving. I'll move that we confirm the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council dated 28th of September. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Graham. All those in favour? Yep, thank you. So that's going to bring us to reports and recommendations from committees. Now, all of the ones where we've had people in the gallery, so I'll go...
Sorry, we've just got elected member communications.
Oh yeah, so we have. I don't know how I managed to gloss over that. It's always sort of hidden under confirmation of minutes. Councillor Moughlin. Yeah, I know. It's sneaky though. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to inform council of a proposed motion to the next Walga zone meeting, so the Southwest Metro zone meeting, and consistent with the conversation that we had as an informal discussion in regards to position on the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament, to request that the Southwest zone ask that Walga take an advocacy position on the establishment of an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament. So I'm merely just communicating that to council, that the committee that myself, Councillor Graham and Councillor Thompson are part of will consider that at the next meeting in November. And I'm quite excited that this topic is gaining momentum in the community, and for us as a local government, and for the sector as a whole to be able to talk about this with the community, I think is extremely important.
Thank you, and my apologies for skipping over. Any other elected member communication? Nope. Okay, that really does bring us to reports and recommendations from committees. So I'm going to go in order of the ones where we have people in the gallery who've spoken. So I'll stick with the order of the agenda. So we'll move the Planning Committee, and then South Beach Facilities, and then Swan River Crossings, and then we'll go back to the remainder of the agenda, starting again from the top. So I trust that's okay with everyone. So I'll move the officer's recommendation for PC 221 10 2221. I can't even get that right. The committee recommendations. Councillor Jones, as chair of that committee, you can second it? Yep, and I don't need to speak on it, so I'll go straight to you.
I just want to refer to the comments made by the neighbour through the gallery, and the request that we increase the height of the balustrade to 1.8. I mean, the R codes say that in order to reduce overlooking, balustrade should be a minimum of 1.6, but it doesn't actually give the council the legal authority to ask for it to be higher than that. I will ask the manager to just verify that before we proceed, and then, having established that, I can move an advice note to be added which requests the applicant to increase the height of the balustrading, but that, just to be clear, that doesn't have any legal force. It's just a request to the applicant to do that for the benefit of the neighbour. The reason it came to committee is simply we had four votes in favour and 2 votes against, so we didn't have the 5 votes necessary for delegated authority. So I'll just ask the manager to verify that my statements are accurate before we move on.
Through the chair, Councillor Jones has it spot on. The R codes do put a minimum in there, and applicants can choose to go above that if they wish, but it is deemed to comply at 1.6 metres in height.
So with the permission of the Mayor, I just move a very minor amendment, which I think we've got written somewhere, to add an advice note to request the applicant to increase the height of the balustrade to 1.8 to, it's there on the screen, so I'll move that.
Seconder, Councillor Lang to second. Did you wish to speak on the amendment, or
no?
Fairly self-explanatory? Others? All right, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? That's unanimous. So that's as amended now. Did people want to speak on this item as amended? Councillor Jones still has his microphone on. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. As was mentioned by the neighbour, I did oppose this development at the committee, and it would be appropriate for me to explain why. I tend to agree with the assessment that the neighbour has provided, which is the open space of this proposal is not compliant with the deemed to comply part of the R codes. It does mean that it can be performance assessed, and the officers did do that, and they felt that the performance assessment was acceptable. But of course, as elected members, we're entitled to form our opinions based on all of the information, including the information that comes from neighbours. And for me, I do agree with the fact that this is a very large block. There is no extenuating circumstance at all for why we should see a reduction in the open space. And more importantly, the open space configuration of most areas would see a private open space, a back garden on a big block, a big family block like this. And what this proposal does is not have a back garden at all on the ground level for a large home that has 5 bedrooms, but puts it significantly up in the air, already on a hill, which has topography challenges, obviously, in terms of overlooking and impact, and puts it up there. And it is the only private open space for the dwelling. It is where all entertainment is likely to occur. And because of that, and because it is so close to both the southern and the western boundary, where it impacts on the adjoining properties, unnecessarily, in my opinion, I just can't bring myself to say on the performance base that this is an acceptable outcome. It definitely doesn't comply with the 45%. Having said all of that too, I mean, I accept my colleagues voting for it because the officers have recommended it. But I would also argue, I have to say, that from a designer's point of view, what the applicant is doing both to the cottage that already exists on the site, that's not heritage listed, but in my view has cultural significance. What they're doing to that is really unfortunate, really unnecessary, and I actually think devalues their property. And I'd further look at their approach to the property. This is a significant piece of land on a hill that has views across Swanbourne Street, has views into Stevens Reserve, has potential views out to the north and to the west, which you would be able to gain if you put your deck spaces out the front and didn't have to worry about 1.6 metre, 1.8 metre high walls because you put them out the back where they're going to be overlooking. So there's a part of me, that basically, I know the applicant's probably sitting there going, I just want to tell that guy to shut up. But the reality is there is a much, much, much better solution for this amazing piece of land. And I would encourage the applicant to, whichever way this goes, to actually pursue that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you. I think Councillor Sullivan summed it up quite well. I have significant concerns about the overdevelopment of this site and the impact that it's going to have on the street and so on. And I agree that the discretion being sought for open space is not really acceptable in my view, and it's going to be really unfortunate if this goes ahead, so I can't support it.
Councillor Groom.
I have to say much the same, and the reason I need to say it is because in the planning committee meeting, I actually supported approval for this. But when I have kind of revisited the site, reflected more on the discretion we're being asked to do and the impacts, and like Councillor Sullivan, realise that there is a solution that delivers a better outcome for everyone, both the neighbours and the residents, by simply putting the deck and some of the living space to the front and the bedrooms at the back. It might not actually be a smaller building. It might not even address the open space, but it would warrant the consideration of that variance. And for a person who has a north-facing deck in much the same location that looks out over a street, I know it's a good outcome that reduces the impact on the neighbours and would create better performance of that dwelling. So, you know, it's a really poor outcome, and certainly the kind of new versions of the R codes for multi-unit housing do not support outdoor living space that is surrounded by 1.6 metre screens all around it. So we shouldn't be supporting that for a house either, particularly not when it's on a large lot and there are other solutions to get a superior outcome. So, yeah, I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Lang.
Thank you. Firstly, just apologies for being a little bit late this evening. Transport was held up. This was a tough one, and I did vote against it last time. And it's with the planning and the R codes not taking into consideration the topography of this site. And you've got one higher block and a two-storey house overlooking another property, which makes this really difficult. So, for all the reasons that have been mentioned by Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Groom, I didn't support it, and I won't support it again tonight. I just hope the applicant can perhaps look at reconfiguration of this site to produce something that, as Councillor Groom said, works better for everyone and creates better amenity for everyone in the neighbourhood.
Councillors?
Can I just make a point of procedure?
Yep.
No elected members have put in an alternative motion for this by the deadline. So if we have a situation where the majority of people vote against it, we don't have any decision at all. So I'll just put it to the people that are opposed to it, whether they would like to consider a referral back to committee with a request to the officers to prepare a refusal rather than simply leave it in limbo.
That's pretty much what we're working on up this end of the room. Councillor Archibald.
That's precisely what I was, sorry, that's precisely what I was thinking, that we need to refer it back before we can finalise it.
So I guess bearing in mind we're doing some work to probably draft some words up to that extent if it does go that way. Did anyone else wish to speak on this item?
Procedure, can I just say, do we vote on this item first and then we can still move that one? Yep. Correct.
So if this were voted down, then we would draft a motion to refer it back. Councillor Lawther.
I missed this one on the planning committee, but I would support a referral to send it back so that we can try to maybe get some of these challenging elements right and see what we can do there.
I'm assuming this is you'd like to speak on it now, and the other thing was procedural, Councillor Archibald?
Yeah, so I thought, well, I may as well fill the gap in between drafting. But no, I totally support what my colleagues have said, and I think the opportunity to discuss with the applicant ways in which some of those issues could be ameliorated, albeit, you know, the constraints we have with the planning regime, I think the impact on the neighbour is going to be substantial. So I think it is something that the applicant should consider when looking at the issues that are on the table. So I feel that, I know that, you know, often we just refer to the planning constraints and try to carry on, but I think in this particular instance, it is warranting a second look.
Thank you. And I will support, well, I won't be supporting the officer's recommendation for similar reasons. And I think the overdevelopment of the site is concerning. And I think if you can start from the position of good neighbours, you know, consider good neighbours, that's always a good place to start. All right, so I think we're probably ready to put this to a vote. Welcome, Councillor Thompson. You sneak in. Okay, you know where we are? Good? Yeah, all good. All right, so all those in favour of the officer's recommendation as printed on the screen? So Councillors Kamada and Graham and Moughlin, all those against? So that is lost. So we'll bring up on the screen the referral motion, which is basically to suggest that we refer it back to the planning committee with a recommendation for refusal. Well, it's up on the screen there. So it refers it back to planning to make a decision at the next appropriate planning committee. Okay, I think there's more words coming. Okay, hang on. Patience. I think there's... Okay, we're looking at the one up there now. Just check with the manager of governance that she is happy with that. Okay. All right, so everyone's had a chance to have a look at that, and is that the final version we're putting up there? Okay, no, it's still evolving. Cool, editing by committee. This is why you come to council meetings, because it's fun to watch. Comfortable with that procedurally? So just for those in the gallery, we can't not make a sort of decision tonight, so we can't just leave it hanging with a being voted down. So this is what we're working on to try and give some direction as to where it might go next. Councillors, does that meet with the intent for those people who voted against that? Yep. Can't speak, just nod. All right, I'm going to put this one to the vote. No, I think we do need to move and second it. I'll move it and Councillor Groom is seconding it. So we will now we can debate it, I guess, can't we? The referral, we're not deferring, yeah. Okay. So this is moved and seconded. All those in favour? And against? Councillors Kamada and Graham and Sullivan. Did you vote twice? No. Against? Okay. All right. So that's carried. So for the applicants, what this means is it's going back to the administration. There's been enough concerns here tonight. I think you probably heard what they are, to ask them to work with you to bring something to the planning committee. Sorry, we can't enter into debate. Thanks. Thank you. We can't enter into the debate. Okay, that's going to bring us to the FPOL items. So the first of those is the South Beach facilities. For those of you who are following the run sheet, I'm going to move the officer amendment, which I'm just going to go to in the document. So just to make sure that we know exactly, it's basically the option 3 version. So if you go to the agenda, it is think it's the last one printed on that item in the agenda. Yeah, so noting that officers did also prepare an alternative. Yeah, it's page 37. So just so we all know what I'm moving, and it's up there on the screen. It's page 37. Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Moughlin. Into debate. Would anyone like to speak? Yes.
If I can ask a question of the CEO, just in terms of some conversations that were being had very late today about possibly deferring this and or doing some minor modifications to what you see on the screen, such that a working group would be established, a CEO working group would be established to deal with some of the matters that are, I guess, still outstanding. Now, I know the CEO probably hasn't had much of an opportunity to have a look at that because it was very late in the day. So I just want to see whether he has had an opportunity to review that and whether one version or another version would be preferred. Thank you.
Through the chair, I did have a brief look at it, and we do have something ready to go if council go that way. At the moment, the preference is to try and get an option 3 that works as a resolution tonight. If council were to defer back to a working group, then that's their prerogative, and we do have some words here tonight to allow that to occur.
Thank you. Councillor Moughlin.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose this one's been floating around for millennia, most probably. And I see, yeah, fellow councillors maybe shaking their heads, rubbing their foreheads in angst. And I certainly feel that coming out of the FPOL meeting that there was a clear direction to officers to come back with 2 options for council to consider. And I think that's what they've done for this meeting. And I think it's most probably important for us to consider those and look to make a decision tonight. I think also the amended officer's recommendation takes into consideration a number of the concerns that have been raised. I'm, for one, most probably relatively comfortable with the design of option 3 and what has been brought forward for us. The addition of the changing places, the family spaces, I think are important. I note, the officer's recommendation includes an opportunity to increase, as part of the review process and detailed design, the number of change areas. I also hear the comments in regards to closed showers in the changing rooms and space and the issues that may create. I would most probably also make a comment that I think they are important for us to have in those facilities because not everyone is as comfortable to shower with everyone else and get changed. I'm completely fine to do that myself, but I know others might not be. And I think the design of this with the opportunity to provide that additional oversight again in the detailed further design, I think is important. Maybe just ask a question around the proposed, the officer's recommendation where it refers to an increase to the number of change areas and whether it might be more appropriate to use the word modify to the number of modify the change areas because the layout might be an important point for consideration. So just to put that out there, if whilst debates occurring and for consideration. So it would be in that realm of modify the arrangement of the change areas rather than just an increase to the number of change areas. But I'll wait and hear how everyone progresses through the debate. Yep, I'm happy to do that now. Yep. So yeah, it would be. Yeah, I think so. So modify the change areas in the male and female change rooms, modify the layout of the change areas in the male and female change rooms to be explored through the detailed design. Yeah, modification of layout. Yeah.
Laughlin. Yeah, cool. Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, look, I was generally sort of supporting the proposal to not make a decision tonight or not lock ourselves in, because I feel like there's too many moving parts at the moment. And to be honest, in my mind, they're starting to get quite muddled up. If you notice, the attachments don't even have the actual plans for the options that we're considering in the agenda. I keep flicking through and I'm having to look at other documents. There's some kind of roof space landscape image, but there's not any internal design drawings in the attachments. And I think the design that we have at the moment is not quite right, but I think we're getting really close. I think we've got a fundamental issue in question about whether or not we support removing the tree, which in some ways was already made, but has been revisited and, with understandable reason. But also that even with that option applied, it's still not the ideal design yet. So I do think that it's probably something that just a little bit more conversation and work and clarification would really help on. And I would hope that, pushing this into November is not unacceptable, because I don't feel like I'm in a position to be able to make a clear decision tonight.
Councillor Groom.
I'm deeply frustrated that we're being asked to make what's essentially a false choice. So we're being asked to choose a building that the changing areas are not adequate for the purpose, so they don't meet the design brief, or to lose a tree. We've got a solution on the table. It may not be perfect. It may not be the one the architects want to deliver, that don't make us make that choice, that have an adequate change area and that don't make us lose a tree. So I don't know how we got here. I don't want to delay the project, but I can't support the decision I'm being asked to make in favour of either of those options, when we're not actually being given accurate information in the assessment of those options, which is frustrating to me. And that is not being driven by our officers, so I'm not kind of pointing a finger there. But yeah, deeply frustrating that I was going down the path of supporting. I wasn't get confused with what option. Option one, because it was like we need to get those change facilities working, but we don't. It's not an either or. So yeah, that's where I'm sitting.
Off the back of your comments, Councillor Groom, can I ask an officer question around option 2? And it's also to resolve perhaps the issue that was raised in public question time. So why, I think the question was, why was option 2 off the table, that maintained the tree but gave some, differently configured spaces in there? So could I get an officer comment on that? Graham or Ryan? Just rolling in there, Mr. Abbott.
Thank you, through the chair. So option 3, which was the one presented at FPOL, was essentially a refinement of option 2, and that was based around feedback around the overall project budget and trying to reduce the budget down. And the way it did that was it just reduced some of the circulation space within the building, which wasn't, I guess, usable change area. It was sort of, I guess, a circulation space, but as we've heard, that provides some additional sort of social area. So that was the drive behind that, to reduce that area and change areas.
Thank you. Thanks for that feedback. I guess I'm wondering whether we could at least get to the point where we get clarity as to tree or no tree tonight. So just to put it out there as a bit of a thought, rather than head off back into the tree or no tree discussion, as well as the how do we configure the change rooms discussion. So partly that was the intent of my question. Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. I certainly do not support removal of the tree, and the tree will, by all estimates, last for another 40 to 100 years. It will outlive the building that we're talking about putting in the place of the tree. So it's a magnificent tree. I would consider it one of the significant trees of Fremantle. And we pride ourselves on trying to save trees, whether it's on public or private land. So I just can't for the life of me see why we would even consider removal of the tree. I think tonight, and certainly at FPOL 2 weeks ago, when we looked at this, the modified option, option 3, which was the preferred option of the officers, was preferred for various reasons, which are listed in the agenda. What was commented on tonight by the swimming fraternity, and I don't know very much about swimming facilities on beaches. I tend to go home, but I'm happy to take the comments on board. And certainly, what was presented to us here is a modified option 3. I kind of feel like we've put this through FPOL twice. I think really we need to make a decision about signing off, in my view, on option 3. I'm very happy to have something that facilitates a little bit more dialogue with the users of the facility, and to consider what was put here. It seems to me, when I look at the drawings tonight, they're fairly logical, and putting in less cubicles is a pretty simple thing to do. So also moving a doorway and some of the suggestions that were put here. So I'd be quite happy to support the option that says we approve option 3, but subject to going through a bit of a process to nut out the final design as we put in with the alternative. Some of that was discussed in committee, the idea of how we might get to sort of spend a bit more time refining it. And so I'm very happy to support that. I was happy to support the original recommendation of committee as well, but given some of the comments tonight, I think it's reasonable for a little bit more dialogue to happen before signing off. So I don't need this to come back. I feel option 3, with some more discussion and a general agreement about what is required in that facility, that could be signed off. Now, if some elected members, and certainly my colleague Councillor Groom has got more experience than me in change rooms on beaches, if these people wish to get a bit involved with the community, then then I think that would be something we could easily accommodate. We get together with the staff, try and nut out the final design, approve option 3, and get on with it. Because I think we've kind of said, there it is, leave the tree, build it in that site, and get on with it. I think I can't see why you would bring it back to committee. We've all made a decision that we need to build this building, and we've kind of come down to this point of option 3. Generally, it was supported at committee. It has been supported by the staff, and if we can get it to the point where the users of the facility are all feeling very comfortable about the final layout, then we need to kind of move on and get going. So I'd be happy to support an amended the amendment that's up there for option 3, but that requesting that they go back to the reference group and the broader community to do the final layout, and also include some elected members who are interested in it at that point.
So, Councillor Archibald, are you suggesting that at point 2 there you would like to add some words in that, because at the moment I think provide an update probably doesn't describe quite what you would be suggesting as a minor amendment there?
That if the officers engage with the broader, well, I don't know about the whole broader Fremantle community, but certainly the stakeholders and elected members to finalise the design layout for option 3. But it should be done under delegated authority to the staff to sign off.
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty much what I've written.
Which one would you say that one is, Councillor Sullivan? The proposed alternative recommendation? Because I think that was for a different option.
No. Well,
is it an email?
I think it's part 2 I'm talking about.
Yeah. So if you've got some words that you think would be a good substitute for part 2, I'm happy to see those. Are they?
So I well, can I have the floor?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm speaking on the item. I will point out that I have withdrawn my alternative.
Okay.
During the gap between FPOL and today, Councillor Groom and I, the two, I guess, architects in the room on the council, have spent time with Louise, the delegation, I guess, from a very large swimming group, former employee of the council as well. So someone whose advice we are used to receiving. And the reality is, as I predicted in FPOL, that while we had said in the previous FPOL that we were very concerned about the space that was available for swimmers in the change room that had been proposed then, what came back, in my opinion, was actually in terms of the one that's recommended for approval, option 3, was actually worse. And I don't want to labour that point because I know it had sort of started to get to design by committee in a sense. So, you know, we all have to put our hands up when that happens and say, sorry, guys, that's probably, you know, how that came about. But the reality was the design in option 3 significantly reduces the amount of space that's in the communal part of the change room where people can get changed. It puts 3 cubicles in rather than 2 with changing space in there, which means people will go into those showers and stay there for a very long time while they get undressed, shower, and redressed in a cubicle rather than the open shower arrangement. And it only leaves 1 shower in the open arrangement. It also often means that people know that their clothes are going to get wet if they take them into the cubicle, so they get mostly undressed, hook their dry clothes up outside the cubicle, and then go into the cubicle and shower. So there's no less demand for space outside on the general sort of benches. But the worst thing was you could pretty well see into the showers. You could pretty well see into the open section of showers or shower from outside. So it just fundamentally did not work. And both Councillor Groom and I just said, well, we cannot support that option. And so that's why there was, you know, I mean, I just got frustrated, I have to say. And that's why I said, well, I'm not going to redesign it for them. That's not my job, even though I've done it in the past. I will support the one that actually works, which was the longer version and required the removal of the tree. Now, the reality is, having sat down with both my colleague, Councillor Groom and Louise, I know that the options that Louise presented and also the really quick scribbles that I've looked at, that there are solutions within the space that's available in option 3. So I am quite happy to concede that the option 3 footprint, generally speaking, in principle, if you like, is an acceptable space. What it doesn't do, and this is something that was specifically asked through the consultation process, was to deliver the change room areas with a degree of open roof. It doesn't do that, and I wouldn't mind re-prosecuting that with the architects and the people who basically said we would prefer to have a section with an open roof like it is now. So that's possible, but the reason it's disappeared largely, from my assessment, is that the change in places room and the universal wheelchair store area, which we asked to be incorporated, have been incorporated into the building on the end of it, which means that particularly at the female end of the change room part of the building, there is no real opportunity for openness to the sky. So one of the thoughts that I have had is whether or not those facilities, we asked them not to be out between the building and the road reserve, whether or not those facilities could actually be an addition on the cafe rather than an addition on the toilet blocks. Seems to me it's quite possible and feasible. So in a late email today, trying to find a way to get a solution, trying to find a way for us to move forward, what I had suggested to the CEO was two alternatives. One was a deferral, which was to go back and set up a CEO working group, or the alternative was to approve in principle this option 3, and in part 1, add in the words and request the CEO establish a CEO working group consisting of elected members, staff, and a representative from the South Beach Swimmer Group to progress the detailed design, etc., as per the rest of it, with the CEO having delegated authority to approve the final design. And then it went through those A, B, C, and D, and it simply modified B a little bit to talk about the configuration of the male and female change rooms to be further refined, improved. What was being suggested is it does the same sort of thing, but it also just added another dot point, the location of the wheelchair storage and changing places room to be further explored, including possible relocation to the end of the existing cafe. So it simply tried to identify those two elements primarily that needed reconsideration, but basically as a council approving the footprint to not go into the tree zone, but to seek some modification or at least some discussion. Not with everybody, but with the primary people who've actually come back to us and said, this doesn't work. It probably works for everybody else, but it doesn't work for this particular very intensive group. So before I finish speaking, I'd probably have to flag or move that as an amendment if that's acceptable as a minor amendment.
Okay, well, I mean, so we've got two things going on here. I think Councillor Archibald was sort of in the process of wanting to amend something, so there's been some work done on that. That's now up on the screen. Yep. So there's, it's probably a little bit 6 1, half dozen the other. I hadn't seen the amendment of which you were speaking, Councillor Sullivan. So I guess it's a question of which of these better captures our intent. So Councillor Archibald, I guess, as the person who was already looking at an amendment, perhaps if you can have a quick look at what's been drafted for you there, and then we'll have a quick look at the other one when you're ready, and we can decide whether we're going to move your version, whether you want to move your version or whether you want to leave it to Councillor Sullivan to move his.
Could we put Councillor Sullivan's up just for another
when
minute,
you're ready?
please?
Yep, absolutely.
I think the way of explanation, if you'll tolerate it, the difference simply is it's actually a targeted CEO working group. CEO, we don't have to request a CEO. You can do that anyway if you chose to. But it's using a tried and tested technique to get to the real nut of the issue. I don't have a problem with going back to the broader community with what we're doing, but I don't think you want to reopen the entire design process to the broad community. We just want to fix these last couple of things and get on with it, is what we need to do.
Councillor Archibald?
Yes. Look, based on that, see, I was looking at the last part of the previous option, and I did have a bit of a concern about consulting with the broader Fremantle community because I think we're just going back round in circles. So I'm quite happy with Councillor Sullivan's alternate. I think it's pretty much covered everything, and it does mean that it can go on, get resolved and carry on. It doesn't need to come back to this chamber. Yeah.
Okay. So Councillor Sullivan, so you don't wish to move an amendment. Councillor Sullivan can move his amendment if he wishes.
So are you happy to rule it's minor?
Yeah. Broadly speaking, yes. I think the intent's where we got to in committee. I want to say it's minor because the intent is where we were at in committee discussing this. So.
Yeah, and look, frankly, the CEO working group part of it, he doesn't need a request from us to do that. No. So therefore, that's why I think it's minor.
Yep. So you can move that, and we'll get a seconder for that one, Councillor Archibald. So on the amendment, Councillor Sullivan, you've probably already introduced it a fair bit. Can I just raise a slight concern with the amendment, and happy for other people to have a comment on this. We've now narrowed it down to a single representative from the South Beach swimmer groups, and while I do appreciate that there is a particular interest there, you know, you change one thing and then someone else becomes unhappy. So rather than define that, I would be happier with words that said something like targeted stakeholder groups, because I feel like, you know, looking back on this in history, it's pulling out one very specific group, but potentially, and we don't know this yet, to the detriment of others. Councillor? I think it's fairly large. I think the idea is we're narrowing down here. Yeah.
What would to make it including, so the CEO can make that decision? You know, if there's someone else out there that needs to be in the room, put them in the room.
And targeted stakeholders, including the South Beach Swimmer Group.
Yep. So I'm happy to make it read that way.
Yep. So seconder's happy with that. Yep. So targeted. Yep. Including the South Beach Swimmer Groups. Okay. On the amendment, any further discussion? Stunned silence. Councillor Graham.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, talk about frustration on this one. I mean, we've just gone back to base one, I think, haven't we? We've gone back to the future of starting this project, which was started, you know, back in the 1990s. And basically, you were asking something about the tree. Well, if you get rid of that tree and go to option one, the problem is solved. But I know I'm not going to win that argument, so I'm not going to try to. But that's the reality. So we're now going back again. We're going to go around in circles again. We're going to engage all these people again. And in about the beginning of winter, we might still be not making a decision, but we certainly won't be making a decision in summer. I'll give you the tip.
Thanks, Councillor Graham. Others? All right. So I am going to put the amendment to a vote. All those in favour of the amendment? And against? Councillor Graham against. And coming back to the item now as amended, is there any further discussion on the item as amended? I, for one, will be very excited to get on with this, and hopefully we are not going round and round. As Councillor Graham suggested, we are doing some very targeted, detailed design on the way to building it. So if there's no further discussion, I'll put the item as now amended. All those in favour? And against? Councillor Graham against, so that is carried. Thank you. Wow. That was fun. That's going to bring us to Swan River crossings. So I'm going to move the officer alternate recommendation printed on page 89. So this was the one following the FPOL meeting that was drafted by officers to try and reflect the sentiment of that meeting. So I'll move that and get a seconder for that one, if I may. Anyone? Yep, Councillor Graham. Thank you. So on the officer's recommendation, any discussion? Giving you all a bit of time. And bearing in mind, this is to be read in in conjunction with attachment 2 and the additional documents. And I think Councillor Lang, you wanted to add in something that you foreshadowed about the cycle connections, but that is covered in the attachment. So you might just want to cross-reference with that and make sure that you're comfortable with that. But there are other amendments, so have a look at that and make sure that you're comfortable with what's in the attachments. Okay, so I've received proposed amendment from Councillor Sullivan, and I think we talked about moving that in some parts. So, Councillor Sullivan, did you want to speak to the item or to your amendment?
Look, I'll speak to the item and then move the amendments and try and seek your guidance as to how you want to do that. You know, when we've been dealing with this matter, it's been incredibly frustrating and complex, and I know my colleagues would like it to be simpler, but the reality is this is a really complex project, and there are no simple solutions, and that is why we need a very detailed, multi-criteria type process to try and help the government and the community and ourselves to all get on the same page with what should be an amazing project. Now, the actual bridge design itself, from what I can see, has come a long way. And while I don't think it's in the right location, I will say categorically that the work that Anthony Duckworth-Smith and his team have been doing in terms of the design of the actual physicality of the bridge itself is positive. But what's obviously caught everybody a little bit by surprise is the way, in particular on the southern side, that the proposal lands into the existing communities and the existing environments that we're here to nurture and to enhance. And it's doing so in a way which is kind of like the antithesis in many ways of the sorts of urban environments, the sorts of residential quarters, the sorts of recreational spaces that will both support that and complement that. So it's being done in a way which actually clashes with that. It actually clashes with what it is that we want to see either side of the river. And for that reason, you know, it very quickly became obvious to me more recently that there are no real significant bridges in Perth that have been designed between two town centres. Major bridges in Perth are connecting a bit of a freeway to another bit of a freeway, or a very big road to another very big road. And so we're not, as a city, as a community, used to designing from one urban enclave to another urban enclave. And we need to, we need to be able to do that. And that's what this whole process now is about. So I want to thank my colleagues, staff and community for the work that's sort of gone in the last few weeks in terms of trying to write down what are our objectives for the area. And it's a little bit unfortunate, that we've sort of seen a year go by from when the alignment of the bridge itself was resolved, in a sense, to really fine-tuning those criteria. They did exist in 2020 and they were pretty good for something at the beginning, but we've now fine-tuned those because we've taken into account the fact that what we know about how the bridge lands is significantly different and has other impacts that we really needed to take into account. And the volumes of traffic and all of those sort of things. So those criteria that are in the attachment, I think are excellent, and I hope everybody supports them. What's not quite as polished is the recommendation itself, and so what I'm proposing is to work on that recommendation, put it into a sort of a hierarchical order of saying what we support, what we have significant concern about, and then how to process that with the Alliance and with the community. And so with your indulgence, I would, if you want me to, I can move straight to the amendment and speak to aspects of that, or if you want to decide which bits you want to divide up, and we speak to each part of the amendment separately.
I suspect we're probably better off doing that in voting, not in speaking. Councillor Archibald, you did want to speak before, and I'm just wondering if you want to speak on the item before we get to an amendment.
Yes, well, Councillor Sullivan pressed the button just before I got my mind pressed, but I just wanted to say, while I appreciate the alternate recommendation, I was still quite comfortable with the recommendation that we dealt with at FPOL. I think it was quite simple, and what we do need is we need good dialogue with the state government over the implications and alternatives and why certain decisions were taken by the Alliance group. So either way, that conversation will happen, which is great. You know, I'm very, very pleased that we've got to that point. And I think too, really, as a community, we have acknowledged we do need a new bridge. We've acknowledged that you know, certain aspects of the environment around the new bridge is very important. So, you know, we have come a long way. I don't want the state government to feel that we're kind of chopping and changing it. I think a lot of good work and good decision making has happened. So I'm quite happy to support the FPOL recommendation as it was in the agenda. But that said, either way, one of these two will get up tonight, and so I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you, but I am supportive of the FPOL decision.
The one that's on the screen at the moment?
That's not the FPOL decision.
That's why I'm checking. This is the one that was developed after the FPOL. Yeah, that's what I thought you meant, but I thought I better just check for clarity. Probably of a similar mind to Councillor Archibald, but I mean, Councillor Sullivan, if you want to speak, move and speak to your amendments, or Councillor Groom, do you want to speak before amendments or on them?
I might, but it'll probably lead into the amendments. So I'm generally satisfied with the motion that was put to us, but it doesn't explicitly talk to the document that we've put together with our principle and objectives. So it doesn't give that document the kind of endorsement of council. And I think that's really important that we do explicitly do that. So it's not just an attachment and a set of ideas that's nice and we hope they'll consider when they develop their criteria. We're actually saying these are the principles and objectives that we've carefully thought about, and stress is important. So that's why I have been engaging with Councillor Sullivan in this week, and I do support the direction of the words he's taking. And I also do want to give prominence to the concerns of our community about that option, because the reason we are engaging so heavily in this is that we think it matters, but that we're reflecting the interests of our community who strongly think it matters as well. And so I did think it's important that we reflect those concerns in the motion. So I would support the alternative if it was moved.
All right, I think we've just get into it. So if you if you move it as a whole, but perhaps we vote on it in parts, does that meet the concerns? Yep, good.
Yep, so
and seconder, Councillor Groom. Yep. Councillor Sullivan.
thank you. You'll be surprised to know that when Councillor Groom helped me with this, it actually is shorter than the officer's recommendation. The explanations might not be, but the actual recommendation was shorter until I added a couple of elements that Councillor Pemberton wanted me to add in. So there are two elements in there that you might have seen an email earlier in the week that Councillor Pemberton was flagging, and so I've incorporated those. And I'll just deal with those first. They are in part 3, where it says transport and road hierarchy. You can see some additional words added in italics, basically just referencing our integrated transport strategy. So that's a bit of a no-brainer. And then, where was the other one? Yeah. The other one was very minor, wasn't it? Yeah. In terms of the gist of what I've tried to do, and Councillor Groom has basically said some of it already, it is to try and be really clear about what our objectives are and reference them. So in 2020, the objectives or the criteria were actually part of the recommendation. What we have done this time is gone away and done a two-pager, which is in the appendix. They're been really well worked through and made succinct and made generic about any of the options. So it's not favouring one option over another option. It's basically saying these are the sorts of things that we're trying to achieve on both sides of the river and as part of the Bridges project. And that, you know, why would we go through that process and write that if we don't actually endorse it? So the officer's recommendation, it sort of mentions it, but it doesn't endorse it. So one of the aspects of the changes here is to basically state that we endorse those principles and objectives and include the section that Councillor Pemberton raised. It also, as part two, you know, most critically, as Councillor Groom said, it actually says, well, why are we even having a conversation with the state government now? It's because there are strong community concerns about the option, the preferred option that has come out in terms of running Canning Highway down to the Beach Street foreshore area. Now, that's just stating the obvious. Now, this council, I believe, also has those concerns. That's what I've heard. If you don't have those concerns, if you think that that solution is fine, then we can move part two separately and you can vote against it. But basically, what I've heard is that everybody has concerns. It's not saying that that option is completely off the table. It is saying that concerns exist and you know they need to be looked at and perhaps mitigated and or use a different option to try and basically not end up with that type of outcome. The other thing is, I guess, just process. There is a big difference between asking the Alliance to come and give us another briefing behind closed doors and tell us why they've made their decision, as opposed to bringing us all of the information on the options and basically having a transparent multi-criteria assessment process that we are involved in, that the town of East Fremantle is involved in, and other key stakeholders can be involved in, to really go through and prosecute what is the best outcome. Now, I know the state will say, well, that's what the Alliance's job is. But we have to state that as a community, we're not yet comfortable with that. And if we don't state that, then how are we going to get, you know, any attention at all? Because what will happen is they will simply come along and give us a briefing that defends the decision that they've already made. So what this does, the amendment does, and it picks up on, you know, it's a rewrite of the officer's recommendation, so there's no surprises in there. It just picks up on the things, the core things that we need information about. It picks up on the fact that it's no point just giving us, the council, the information. It needs to be given to all of the people that have invested a huge amount of time in also trying to work out what it is that we need to be doing. So that's what this recommendation does. And I hope you support it.
Councillors. Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. Look, I'm, as I said earlier, I'm happy to support this also. The only thing I was concerned about was the reference to the options, and I want it to be clear. I just don't know what that option is. I sent you an email about the terminology, but I think the original reference design from July 21, whereas we did have options that were demonstrated in the agenda for the FPOL meeting, and so I just want to clarify how that's referenced, because I'm not quite sure what the original reference design from July 21 is. and at this point, the options included are the foreshore alignment, which is the Beach Street option, cutting, the tunnel, and I'm presuming the original reference design from July 21 is the Canning Highway abutting. But yeah, I mean, is it easier just to say that?
I'm happy for you to respond to that. We might also see if we can get an officer comment on that language, because in 2021 there weren't any designs, I didn't think, other than an alignment design.
The officer might want to respond because they are his words. So basically, you are correct, Councillor Archibald. I did respond to your email. It basically refers to the 4 generic options being the replacement of the intersection as it is now, but basically with the new version, which is what the director has referred to as that reference option. So it's the one that everybody remembers from 2021 when the government came out and showed the alignment where it is, the bridge alignment, and T-junction coming in from Canning Highway. That's what has been referenced as those words. But you're right. It's basically that option. Queen Victoria Street running into Canning Highway running into Queen Victoria Street, as it does now. The cutting, which is option 2. The road onto the foreshore, option 3. And the tunnel version, which is like the cutting, but with basically a lid on top of it, is option 4. So they are the 4 generic options.
Yeah, just for the sake of clarity to the community, though, the document that most people would be reading is the FPOL data and the attachments to this item, before us. And I don't know that I've read, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would have thought saying the Canning Highway, there must be a better phrase so that people know, yes, okay, I've seen that drawing, it's in the agenda, and that's the Canning Highway in more or less the current alignment.
Said I'm happy to change it. So if the
Okay, well, maybe we need to work. I mean, I also wouldn't be prepared to support 5 with the current wording, because I think also there are 3 options that were published in the FPOL paper and that were real options that were put in front of us. None of them were a tunnel. So I feel really kind of uncomfortable to put a tunnel in there at this point where, it's not something the community is calling for. It's not, it's kind of asking for something that, quite honestly, I think to stand in front of government and say we also now want you to look at a tunnel as well doesn't feel like it has a lot of community or other momentum behind it. So I'd be much more comfortable with words that said something like the 3 options outlined in the report to FPOL in whatever the month was, this month, last month, this month. October 2022. Councillor Mofflin?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I would concur with that, just for clarity, to make sure that it is clear for public as well as ourselves about what we're actually referring to, and without a tunnel being on public record as an option, I don't think we can include that one. And not that I'm getting the sense that this would be the case, but maybe have a little bit of concern about moving this in parts, because we could end up with a very incoherent recommendation, because it is quite different from what stands, and we could get stuff that doesn't work with different parts of the motion. So yeah, I'm not getting the sense that people necessarily, as part of moving in parts, there's a great sense that any of these elements wouldn't get up, or one way or another. But yeah, it's a concern of mine.
I would agree that the main concern I've heard is around 5. So if that were able to be worded differently, I think the moving in parts might not be required. So if I go back to the mover, would you be comfortable with words that reference the FPOL attachment? Attachment 1?
No, because you all know how much significance I have placed on having a tunnel version as an option. It was something that I raised with the proponents of the Alliance. They have done options. It was simply, and this wasn't the Alliance coming to us with 3 options. We picked 3 options The staff picked 3 options to present to us, not the Alliance. And the notion that we're going to have criteria assessment and we're going to take an option off because some councillors don't like it or because they think it might upset the state government is unacceptable to me. You know, you don't do a multi-criteria assessment and then just prior to it take an option off the table. So that option was something that Main Roads spent a fair amount of time on and does exist to the same level of degree as the other options that have been presented to us. So I think taking the sense of options out is prejudging a multi-criteria assessment, because essentially you're going to have option 1, which is sort of like it is now, and option 3, because option 2 doesn't work because no one in their right mind is just going to have a cutting through the hill.
Councillor Lang.
I tend to agree with both sides of the argument's been put forward on this. The way I read, there was a moment ago, there's another version up there. If we could put that on there again, which is quite neat and succinct because it refers to the 3 options that have been discussed in public. But I also sympathise with Councillor Sullivan's position. Are we asking Main Roads to also put forward an option for the tunnel? And I wouldn't mind seeing it, to be honest. I wouldn't mind requesting Main Roads to put forward that as an option. And I think we can ask them to put that. I think we can ask them that question. So we can have the 3 that have been discussed, and maybe point C on there is requesting an option be put forward on the tunnel, just so we can have a look at what it might look like.
That's a potential way forward, is that there's a B that refers to 3 options and then a separate point that refers to a request to see a tunnel. I would note that the Bridge Alliance, when they did come and brief elected members, did say there were 3 options that got to a certain stage in their design process. There were probably 20 that got to the stage before that. So, we do want to duck and dive as well. I believe that got further than a tunnel option in the briefing that they gave all of us. I think to give elected members the opportunity to support the amendment, but to make a choice on whether they want to go after Main Roads and ask for a tunnel might be a way forward to get a resolution on this. I'll call it a question.
Yes, because it goes back to the issue of the previous way that was written, which Councillor Lang mentioned. If we could say that, the 3 options that are included in the agenda and the option of a tunnel. I mean, we know that it exists, and we can, so it's become, put on the table. I was just concerned about the wording of this. I'm saying the same thing. Still the 3 options in the agenda. So the words that were up there satisfied my concern, and all we need to say is and a tunnel, and then we get on with it.
I mean, the other option is we can put this amendment in total, and then we can have a second amendment to, I guess, amend the amended recommendation. So I'll just see if we can get that back up on screen for you, Councillor Archibald. So we're just going to pop back up on screen the one that referenced the options in the attachment 1.
Point of order, I have an amendment. It's on the floor and it's being debated.
Okay. All right, well, what we might do then is we'll put this amendment. I think I'm left only with the option of, well, either putting it in parts or putting it in as a whole. Yeah, but I think Councillor Sullivan wants to put the amendment to a vote. So I will flick that onto the screen for a minute, see if that is anything that would be considered by the mover and the seconder. If it's not, then we will put this one to a vote and reserve the option to then further amend it. It's possible, right? So there's two versions there.
I'm happy to do that because I can see that the room would like to be able to vote on that. And so there is, if we want to take the best option off the table, so be it, and you'll live with that consequence. But yes, if you want to use the alternative that you've just written, so an A, B, and a C.
Again. Yeah. Is the seconder, Councillor Archibald? You were the seconder and you requested we have a look at this. So we'll just put this back on the screen. If you're happy, then I will move parts 1 to 4 together, and then part 5 A and B, and then part 5 C.
Yes, I'm happy for it. I mean, I do believe we just need to get in the room and have a broad discussion about the options. So I am happy for Councillor Sullivan's fourth option to be on the table. But I just wanted to be really clear on what the three options were, because that's all referenced in the agenda material. So that's really my request, and so we just move forward.
Okay, so we're all comfortable with the mover and seconder, and now comfortable with the drafting of that. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken on the amendment who wishes to speak on the amendment? So I'm not going to be supporting 5C, so I'm going to be clear on why that is. A couple of things. I don't feel like there's any desire coming up in the concerns that we've raised for a tunnel. I think it's hugely disruptive to the environment and other things. It creates quite a disturbing urban realm around it, in my view. And I'm just giving you these reasons as to why I wouldn't be supporting this bit. I also feel like we need to maintain some credibility to be able to be in this process, and I think to start asking for options that, at this point in the process clearly aren't on the table may not allow us to achieve the other things that are really desperately being asked for in the rest of this motion, which are about involving stakeholders and community. I would probably be more happy if we didn't articulate specific options and said, let's do something with the community to really work through the criteria. But in the spirit of compromise, I can get all the way up to 5B and agree, but 5C is literally a bridge too far or a tunnel too much. So that is why I won't support 5C. I'm perfectly comfortable for other people to do what they do and will be bound by that decision. Councillor Jones.
I just wanted to get clarification. There is an option that was considered, which is called a cutting. And a tunnel is just a cutting with a bigger lid. So it's not that it's not being considered. I mean, that they showed us a cutting with a small amount of concrete over it, which provided a walkway to the river. If you had a cut and covered tunnel, irrespective of a cutting with a lid or a tunnel, I mean, it's just a matter of words. They have looked at it, they have assessed it, and the reasons they gave for not liking it was that because they only put a very narrow lid over it and left the rest of it open, so they destroyed the whole landscape. If they put a lid over the whole lot, then they'd have a significant amount of landscape all the way from Cantonment Hill to the river. So I do think it's worthy of inclusion, and I do think most of the work on it has been done.
Can I just ask a clarifying question for the Director of Planning or Infrastructure? Are there technically differences between a cutting and a tunnel?
Thank you, Mayor. It's technical, I guess. A lot of tunnels are built, like the Northbridge Tunnel was cut and covered, so it was a trench with a concrete lid popped on the top. So we can get into semantics about what's a cutting and what's a tunnel. But I think, as Councillor Jones pointed out, they have option 2 actually is a cutting, and that there was a significant amount of work done on option 2 before it was discarded. I do believe Councillor Sullivan is actually looking for something far in excess of that. So I think that's the difference. It's not really playing with the cutting as an option 2. I think it would require an additional recommendation to start exploring something which is significantly different from what we've seen so far.
Thank you. Councillor Kamada.
Yeah, thank you. suppose the way I look at this, if we were able to explore that option of having the tunnel, as Councillor Sullivan is indicating that he believes was on the table, it does help us to achieve the objectives of I think the people who do want to open up that precinct in front of the naval store, so that you'll still be able to have maintain both avenues as being Beach Road and Canning Highway, and then you'll also be able to achieve the other objectives. So it's something that I would just like to see if it's possible to do for those reasons. But for me, otherwise, I think we will be reverting back to option one, because I just can't see the other possibilities working. Thank you.
Councillors, are we finished discussing the amendment, allegedly? Yep. All right, so I'm going to put the...
Just very quickly.
Yeah.
I know, Mayor, that you don't like the notion of a tunnel, and I accept that. Everyone has their own thing. But to suggest that it's not credible, that we would lose credibility with the state government for suggesting an option which I know they have looked at in great detail, which is potentially exactly the same configuration as a cutting, but with a bigger lid on it, and produces one less road in the landscape without actually losing the functionality of the road, is, for me, losing credibility would be losing the respect of the community in going back to the government and saying there are better options here. Doesn't have to be the one I happen to push. It doesn't have to be the one you happen to push. But there are better options here, and we should explore that. That is the credibility that I'm trying not to lose. I'm trying to gain with our community. And I have no comprehension at all as to why our state government, which is doing a great job, would not listen to this conversation. And so I urge you to put this very modified, succinct amendment so that we can try and get this back on track. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to move 1 through 5B, and then I'll move 5C separately. Does that meet everyone's separating it out needs? Yep. All right, so all those in favour of the amendment 1 through 5B, and all those which looks unanimous, by the way, against? No. And all those in favour of 5C. So that's and against. So that's myself and Councillor Mofflin against. So the amendment, oh, sorry, Councillor Graham. So that is carried. So back to the item now as amended. Any further discussion on the item? Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak very briefly, I guess more broadly, about the item as a whole. And I wanted to really express that I share the feelings and many of the issues that have been raised by the people in the gallery this evening. I think it's a really important change of direction, I guess, in terms of being able to make sure that we really think about place as much as movement in these kind of things. And I do worry that, what is potentially what's being proposed at the moment with the current design is potentially going to sever the river from the community, and I really worry about the free-flowing traffic that might be at quite a significant volume that therefore kind of transforms that area forevermore. So I'm really glad that this work has been done collectively, and I appreciate everybody's time in feeding into it. I do think, and thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for including the reference to the integrated transport strategy, because again, I think that's something that we need to come back to again and again around how we make sure that mobility is available for everybody in all sorts of different means, and not just defaulting to the domination of the car, which tends to happen quite a lot at the detriment to all other people using the space or trying to move through the space. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's put in so much effort to this process to try and give constructive feedback about how we get a good outcome.
Councillor Jones?
Yeah, I don't want to change anything in the recommendation, but I was trying to make a couple of points that if we go right back to the beginning of this, I think a few of the councillors had the view that none of this should be happening until we've got decisions about the future of the port, the future of Curtin Avenue, the future of the land on the west of the railway in North Fremantle. I mean, North Fremantle is incredibly impacted by this proposal, but we don't actually have any options or choices to look at. We've just got one. That's right through the middle of the town centre. And that's maybe why, so for North Fremantle, all the options are bad. And future options for Stirling Highway would be probably worse. So I just make that comment. So I don't actually support the proposal at all. I think the whole thing should be stalled for a couple of years, the money put back in the bank, and let's progress with the movement of the port and whatever else might happen. Having said that, I think it's starting to feed into a broader narrative about modal change. I know that you were at some conference this morning, also on Facebook, where one of the banners was from the minister that we can't keep increasing road capacity as the population grows. We've got to look at alternative means of transport. But we've still got, and it also triggered by seeing the discussion about the Charles Street, Vincent Street, Duck and Die proposal, which, if you look at it in detail, I hadn't seen it in detail until today. It's like another Savita Street. Take a community, put a massive trench through the middle of it, knock down 30 houses, chop off bits of parks here and there, to allow cars to go a little bit faster and stop a little bit less. And the thing that's always struck me, I came to Western Australia in 1980, and the last place I lived was London. It's quite common in London in 1975 to sit at the same traffic light for 4 cycles of red and green and red and green and red and green. Quite common, almost every day. And it'd take you 20 minutes to go through one traffic light. And that was in 1975, and everybody thought that was normal. When I came to Western Australia, if people have to ever sit at a traffic light and watch it go red twice, they're straight on the phone to the radio, the TV, the newspapers complaining about congestion. So we never seem to take the option of saying, let's just make it a little bit less convenient for the motorist. Let's not knock down the town centre to put the road through. There was something, if you look at the streetscapes that have gone, and if you look at the plans for Fremantle in the 1970s, which led to the formation of the Fremantle Society, we've not moved very far. They were going to knock down one side of High Street, which is why the TAB was set further back. That was the road reserve. So we're going to knock down one side of High Street, one side of Cliff Street, one side of South Terrace, I think, to create 4-lane roads through the whole city centre. And that was the fundamental reason why the Fremantle Society was founded. So I just made those comments. I think we might be at a turning point, and I think the Vincent Street, Charles Street may be the catalyst for that, to say let's get main roads out of the city, let them go and play around Mouchet and up there with their walls and their 16-lane highways, but allowing that kind of thinking to come into the cities, which eventually the road we're talking about here is joining 2 villages, basically on a world scale. These are 2 villages, 10,000 people in North Fremantle and 20,000 people in Fremantle, joined by a 2-lane or 4-lane road. So any semblance of kind of freeway thinking, free movement of traffic, cars having dominance, I think needs to be brought into the discussion. And obviously can't do that with an amendment to what we've got here, but I just want to make those points.
Councillors? Councillor Archibald?
Just a very brief comment. I think that's extremely well said, Councillor Jones, and I thank you for that. I just wanted to make the comment too that by being a little specific about the options tonight, in my view, I don't have any particular, I couldn't possibly make a decision about an option at this point, and I think that's the very reason we want to have that dialogue with the state government. So I don't want the community to think that the inclusion of any option in some way means that we have some particular interest in it, albeit Councillor Sullivan has done a lot of work on the tunnel option, but I think I do look forward to having the dialogue with the state government and moving this forward. Thanks.
Councillor Mofflin?
Yeah, I think I'd most probably just concur with Councillor Archibald, and particularly to think about the mature way in which this council has looked at this issue and has listened to the feedback from community, and the rock and hard place that we're in, and in that this isn't our project. We don't have the levers to pull, and the challenge to be able to provide the insight and appreciate the work that Councillor Sullivan has done, and the flurry of activity over the last couple of weeks to come to a position that we have are likely to arrive to this evening, I think shows that, as I said, maturity at the outset, and the goodwill with which this council is looking to engage with the state government on their project and looking to achieve a positive outcome for Fremantle.
Thanks, Councillor Moughlin. Looks like everyone's spoken. I guess I'd add a couple of things. One is that there was a huge amount of work done by particularly Councillor Sullivan, but I also think Councillor Groom and a few others on the criteria, which are in the attachments to this. And I just want to kind of not gloss over that, because I think it was a huge amount of work that actually captured the key issues that have been raised. So that is a really useful document, and staff, officers. So good on you. And I think, you know, for me, part of my job, which differs perhaps to the rest of council, is I have to go off and try and kind of prosecute some of these arguments, and having that really clear criteria document is a very useful thing. So I really appreciate the work that went into that and the workshopping that went into that. From what I am hearing from the council and from the community, you know, however we word it and nuance it, we want to have an options discussion and we want to have a genuine seat at that table. I think we do need to acknowledge that we are not dealing with main roads. So I think we have to be careful not to interchange main roads and the Bridge Alliance, because this is actually something they have done differently. There is no duck and dive alliance for the Charles Street intersection, and it shows. So we've kind of got to work with the strengths, and I think by being, you know, consistent and credible and putting forward options that we believe, not necessarily design options, but consultation options that we believe are realistic for the alliance, we are doing that. So I really appreciate the work that's gone into that and into the criteria. That is a document that clearly will be able to be put in front of government, and for them to be able to clearly understand what we are looking for through this process. So, yeah, I mean, I think we'll put this one to a vote. I think what we would hope is that the next stage of this is that we have been able to prosecute that argument with the state government about the Alliance being able to do more of this engagement work. And certainly that's what the endeavours will be from here on in. So I'll call for a vote. All those in favour? And that looks unanimous, but against? Yep, no, unanimous. Thank you. Hope that was worth waiting for, public gallery. You don't have to stay for the rest, but, you know, we're only about halfway there, I reckon. So here's a tip. Most restaurants in Freo close at 9. All right. Checking in. Anyone need a 5-minute break, or are we all good? Okay, we're going to take... All right. We'll just note your absence for a minute, Councillor Grimm. And anyone else who requires a short absence? Yep. Right. Alrighty. We are going to move through the agenda now in order. I might just see... oh, and I can't do this while people are out of the room, can I? I was going to see if we could put any on block, but maybe we'll just go to FL4, the sale of Quarry Street. So I'll move the officer's recommendation and get a seconder for that one, Councillor Archibald. I don't wish to speak at this point. Councillor Archibald, did you?
I'm happy to wait until later, thank you.
All right. Did anyone wish to speak? We've got a couple of amendments listed for this one as well. All right, let's go to the amendments then. Councillor Pemberton, your amendment came in first, so we'll look at that one first. Did you want to move that, and have you got a seconder for that one? So, yeah, Councillor Sullivan. So I also saw that there was a discussion about some new words with Councillor Archibald. So I'm not sure if they've made that through to agendas and minutes, but we'll pull that up on the screen and then just make that amendment if we need to.
Time this afternoon. I can forward it through.
I forwarded it through as well.
Thank you.
Pop it up on the screen and then.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you.
Options for the land can be.
So I guess there's two amendments in this, and I don't know whether or not people have a feeling that they might want to vote on the two separately, but that's certainly an option. So the first one is referring to, I think it was clause F above, which is the sort of standard clause we include in these things, saying that we retain a right to purchase the property back if development doesn't proceed within a certain time frame. We've never utilised that. I don't think we're ever going to utilise that. I think we should either abandon it altogether, but at the very least, I thought for the point of clarification around making it a realistic proposition to at least consider, is to have it clearly stated in there that we would purchase it for the price that we paid.
So that's further up in the
that's
document.
Right, point G.
Yeah.
Sorry, F.
Yep. Yeah.
So that was the first one. So just the addition of at the original purchase price.
Yeah.
And the second one, which we were looking at before, below, is an additional 0.5, which is around flagging, I guess, a possibility of re-looking at what might be possible to do with this property should we not receive the asking price or the reserve price and the valuations that we've had. I guess I was looking through my files this morning and so on at the various kind of iterations, projects and thinking around the sale of this property. And so, for example, back in 2016, we put it out to market with an expression of interest for a Bugruppen development, and unfortunately that didn't come off. And largely because the purchase price that we were asking for, one of the conditions was that it needed to be sold at market rate, that it wasn't subsidised in any way. We didn't actually get a proposal that could deliver that kind of outcome at the current market valuation or rate. And so we went back to the drawing board in terms of going, okay, well, let's just put it out to market and see what the broader market will deliver. And obviously we had some criteria originally around the kind of built form outcomes that we wanted and some of the caveats around access ways and overshadowing and all that sort of stuff. And slowly, gradually, all of those things have been removed from the conditions of sale. And now we're in a position where we're proposing to just simply put it out to market with the upzoning and the standard kind of planning conditions applied rather than any specific that are aligned with our objectives, either for this from the strategic plan or specific to that site. And as such, I think if we don't get the market value, or if we don't get what we think the property is worth, it would be a real shame to lose all of that kind of community and strategic benefit that we were trying to get out of this site and still not actually make the return that we were hoping to make. And so this sort of flags that if we don't get a buyer who's actually looking at the kind of numbers that we're anticipating, then we go back and review it and we look at other ways in which we can deliver on our strategic objectives and get some community benefit out of this property. And particularly also, potentially in a model that would enable us to retain the value of the land, therefore not selling it at a reduced price, but also delivering a community benefit and being able to reap that value at a later date, perhaps if it's more appropriate. So that's the general thinking. I didn't want to kind of completely pull the, redirect the ship midstream, if you like, at this stage by proposing this instead of the sale. It was more around going, okay, well, let's just do one more test of the market. And if it doesn't deliver the outcome that we're hoping for, then I think we need to make sure that we deliver the outcome that our community would like to see.
Thanks, Councillor Pemberton. Councillor Jones.
I just want to clarify something that Councillor Pemberton said. I don't think it's the case that only standard planning conditions will apply. We still have, I just want clarification maybe from the director. Is it a policy for the area, or I mean the things like we developed a special policy for the area to protect the neighbours and have heights moderating down to the neighbours, things like that, and that's still in place, I believe, even if. So it's not just standard R code supply. I don't think if it's in the scheme.
Okay, that's a useful clarification. I think do we agree with that assessment that still the scheme has some. There is a scheme amendment that covers this particular piece of property. Yep. Okay, so it's not just the standard R codes, which is a relief. Councillor Lang.
Yeah, thanks. On this point 5, I was actually contacted by someone in the community recently about the specific block, and they introduced me to new legislation we've got in Western Australia. It's called leasehold strata, and that enables landholders like us to lease the property and allows developers to build on it for 20 to 99 years, and we still retain ownership of the land. We get rates on the land, and then we can get the population up in the city, but importantly, we're still owning the land. So that's something that new that's come in since we looked at this property, and so won't add it into point 5, but I absolutely support what Councillor Pemberton's saying. Leasehold strata might be an option for that site in the future.
Interesting. Thank you. Councillor Moughlin.
Thank you. I've got a question in the first instance on the first proposed amendment and the use of the original purchase price. So if the property value had actually decreased, are we, and it might just be semantics, but are we, locking ourselves out of the option of purchasing it back at a lower price? And maybe some advice from officers if that would actually be the case. Would it lock us out from doing that? And if I was the property holder, maybe I would just go, no, I'm not selling it unless it's the original price.
Just through the chair, to protect that, we would have to put that into the contract clause. So you would be locking in the original purchase price, no matter which way the market shifted.
But you don't have to exercise the option.
All right. I think. Did you want to continue from there, Councillor Moughlin, or otherwise it was Councillor Sullivan then Busick?
Yeah, I did if I could. Yep. So thanks for that clarification. And yeah, I suppose my expectation of, on the amendment, my expectation is that officers would investigate options for the use of that land if we weren't able to sell it for the price that we're hoping to, and if that did happen to include looking at the public-private partnerships, that's great. The options that Councillor Lang spoke to, I'm sure it would be a broad range of options that staff would look at to see what we would be able to achieve.
Okay, Councillor Sullivan, I think you did have the call but turned your mic off to allow us to speak, or not, maybe? Otherwise I'll go to Councillor Busick.
Yeah. I've just got a couple of questions. The budget for this year, 22-23, has been balanced and is predicated on the sale of Quarry Street for $4.9 million. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So if we don't sell the land, if we sell the land, all well and good. If we don't sell the land, how do we fund what's in our budget this year?
We would have to make a budget amendment and potentially access any carry forward surplus from the prior year to fund it.
just through the chair, the proceeds of the sale of Corey Street was going into the investment reserve, so technically it does not affect the municipal part of the budget.
Did you want to carry on from your questions?
I'm not in favour of the sale of the land, but I would support alternative for us to have a look at the alternative uses of that land. I think it doesn't really serve the ratepayers well.
All right, well, if you want me to move parts of that separately, just if you want to consider that and let me know before we get to a vote. Councillor Groom.
I am in favour of the sale of the land because it's not doing anything for us or our ratepayers at the moment in its current state. If we could get a way of doing that with an affordable housing outcome, if the market doesn't respond, I'm fully in favour of that. And 1 million houses with some assistance from the Commonwealth Government might be an opportunity that we get to grab. But when this site was planned and there was a lot of detailed work done, fundamental to the thinking for that work was the pedestrian link that Councillor Sullivan keeps reminding us about. And when I first kind of looked at this and heard about it, I wasn't quite so convinced it was needed, but having spent some time looking at how the park works and how the area is developing around it, I can see that it's really critical. We're creating all this density around Queen Victoria Street and Quarry Street. This is the open space for that density, and to not create clear, accessible and safe pedestrian access to that green space makes no sense. It's not really leveraging any of the land opportunities.
Councillor Groom, I'm just going to pull you back to, so we're debating this amendment.
Right, sorry, apologies.
There is another amendment that Councillor Sullivan has yet to move. Okay.
I apologise.
That's all right, I thought you'd want to know. Right, on this amendment? All right. Did you, sorry, Councillor Graham.
Oh, look, yeah, I'll just give my 2 bobs worth now and then I'll shut up. Look, I think this has been around for a long time and we've got to maximise the sale of this property. And in my view, to maximise the sale of the property, we can't put any impediments on it. Now, putting the original purchase price might be okay, but I can't see the value at this point in time of clause 5. I just think that muddies the waters for what we are trying to achieve. And what we are trying to achieve is a fair market price that puts money into our coffers and pays for things that are in this year's budget that's already been, as Officer Hammond said, has been already been allocated. So to me, I just want it short, sharp, clean, get it out there, get it up for sale with no impediments, see what comes back. Hopefully we get the price. And if we don't, well, then we can come back and talk about different models and all that. But to have only one model in Section 5, to me, well, it says such as, I know, but sort of indicates that's what the preferred model is. I just don't think this is the right time to go down that path.
Thanks. I'm hearing a bit of potential sentiment that I should move the F bit and the 5 bit possibly separately, so I'll just maybe keep that in mind. Councillor Archibald.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make the comment because I did send an email out referring to Councillor Pemberton's amendment on the new part 5. And the way it was worded originally, I wasn't happy with because I didn't like having just the reference to one land use, and I prefer it to be something that's opened up more broadly. So I suggested the words used in the short to medium term, including being retained in the ownership of the city, etc. So it doesn't lock us into anything in particular. And that way I think it's something that can sit there and, okay, we see how the land goes, but I totally agree. I want to see this land go to the market, see what happens, and then if that doesn't work, we come back to the drawing board.
Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, I will support the amendment, but I'm not, totally wedded to it either at this stage for the reasons that others have stated. It does feel like we could say it now, or we could simply say it at the other end. If there is another end, hopefully there isn't another end. Hopefully we actually get a sale. And I did just, in that sense, just want to talk about the process and ask a question about that. So, and I'm trying to think anywhere where if the process doesn't reach a reserve price, will that information still come back to us as a council to make a decision, or will the decision just be made because it was $1 short of the reserve price or whatever? So that's a question. And would it be simply better in part 5 on that basis, on the basis that we would get a report back from the sales process, procedure, that we say if council doesn't proceed with the sale, rather than if the reserve price is not met? I'm just wondering if that's...
Through the chair, so we would follow the processes under the Act, which would require public advertising and disposing either through public auction or a period of advertising to the public. We certainly can bring back the preferred purchaser at the end of the process if that's something that council would like to see.
So I guess the question is probably to the mover whether you would be comfortable with the words, the mover and seconder, along the lines Councillor Sullivan stated, which is if the land is not sold, rather than if the reserve price is not met. Okay.
If the land is not sold through this process.
Yeah. Yeah. Any version thereof means pretty much the same thing, I think. So, but I think it is a good point that if it's $1 short, we probably don't want to tie that up in another process. Fairly comfortable with that. Mover, seconder. Seconder? I can't remember. Doesn't matter. Coming back to the issue of at the original purchase price, if we've dealt with that, or Councillor Sullivan, you finished speaking on the amendment?
I don't have a problem with that original purchase price because it's an option. And we've seen these ones before where either the actual valuation's gone up or gone down. But this is actually just trying to say we wouldn't be buying it at a higher price.
So, Mike,
if the option was to try and buy it at a lower price, we would simply not exercise this option and then start a negotiation to buy it back at a lower price. Probably wouldn't get anywhere, but you just relinquish the option and yeah.
I was going to ask the question of officers. I mean, off Councillor Graham's point, do we see that this would potentially devalue the property at all at sale, or are we comfortable that this is a standard enough condition?
It's a fairly common condition.
To include the original purchase price. Yep. Okay. Good. Good to know. Does anyone want me to put the two things to a vote separately, or are you happy to be entirely for or entirely against the amendment?
Test it separately. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. All right. So I will put the.
Can I close, please?
Oh yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to deal with a couple of things that were raised in debate quickly. Firstly, my understanding is that we're expecting more than 4.9 million and significantly more. So I hope that is what eventuates. I'd also point out that this has been in our budget as a sale item since at least 2016. So we do seem to find a way. And as the CEO said, it goes into it's planned to go into reserve, so it's about topping up the investment fund rather than paying for the day-to-day operations. So even though it would be really nice to resolve this quickly, it's not going to be the end of the world if we don't.
Well said. Thank you. All right. Now I'm going to put it to a vote. So F, firstly, I'm going to put all those in favour of the amendment at point F. Please raise your hands. And that seems to be unanimous. No, against. Thank you. It's very hard to see with that computer monitor there. I'm sorry about that. So Councillor Vusic against, and moving down to the second part of the amendment, which is point 5, just guessing. So point 5, that I'll move that one. All those in favour? And against. So Councillor Graham and Councillor Thompson against. So that is carried. So back to the item as amended. Now, Councillor Groom, as you were.
Yep. So I was talking to the original intent of pedestrian access, and that it had been hoped that that could be loaded into the job of the developer, and clearly that's not acceptable, and that's really understandable. But there is an option to subdivide the site to provide that access, and that option one of those options can create a large, attractive development site that has really good street frontage, would also have frontage to Fremantle Park and a frontage to the pedestrian access way. So as a development site, it's really attractive because it's actually got 3 frontages, which allows very good unit typology with maximum natural light and windows and all those kind of things. So it actually creates a really high quality site whilst giving us the outcome we want and producing a third smaller site that is pretty high valued. So some valuations were sent through to us today from the Director of City Business, and those valuations show that a configuration of that sort would realise the same value as selling the site as on whole, as has been put forward to us today, but it also delivers us the pedestrian link, which I think is such, a really good public outcome. So I am strongly supportive of a proposal that would do that work, which was also the recommendation of the consultants that we paid to give us advice in relation to this site.
So are you moving an amendment?
I'm encouraging one of my colleagues to.
Right.
I think she's encouraging me to go to my amendment.
Okay.
So
go on then. I take it you might have a seconder. Go on.
I'll move my amendment.
Groom?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think Councillor Groom's pretty well said it all. I have always favoured the need for a link in that corner of that park. I find that corner the worst septed affected space in the whole park because it's a dead corner. It's been a little bit improved by having a development face it, but there's no direct connection between each of those units and the park. It's not like the sort of a park with a house right next to it with a little wall and a couple of steps. It doesn't create that sort of connection. But also, as Councillor Groom said, the reality is we're trying to create whole areas of high density development in and around Fremantle Park, and accessibility and connectivity, having the route on which you take your dog for a walk that's not on the main road and get you into the park straight away, for me is really, really critical. It's about, like everything we do, should be about how do we make more optimal use of our available public space. We're not going to get more, but we can actually make it far more available and connected and accessible to the community and safe, importantly, safe. And so what this does, and I know that there are a couple of options that were in the documents, but what this is about is it gets you from the city part, in other words, inside the Parry Street ring, say where Princess May Park is, and it gets you into Fremantle Park in the quickest and most direct route that you could possibly do. But that route is also the shortest piece of land across this large site that you could use to get from Quarry Street into that area. So it's the most efficient version as well, and it fixes that corner. So what I've done, and I think it's probably what we should have done in the first place. I say that because that's what I said we should have done in the first place, is it just formalises it, it gets it done. It leaves a block. If you want to just go to the plan, yeah. So it basically leaves the purple block that can either be kept for now, it could be used for a car park, as was shown in the documents, or it could be sold off right now as a single housing lot, or perhaps even a duplex lot or whatever, or it could be used for affordable accommodation or the like, and you've seen versions of that. And it can all be done when we choose to do that. So those who have some doubt about whether we're selling at the the bottom, or the bottom of the market, and perhaps we shouldn't be selling right now, well, we're keeping at least some of the land, and probably that purple lot will be the lot that would gain the highest per square metre rate, and that's why the information that's coming back is telling you if we actually had done a bunch of small lot subdivisions, we'd probably make way more money. That's the reality of the market, but at least that incorporates a little bit of that, and it gives us that option. It also was the piece of land that was right next to that really important heritage house that we struggled with in terms of, do we really want to do a big development right there? So that's what this proposal does. I apologise, it's slightly different to what was circulated, because unfortunately when I drew the drawings first, I put lot 1, 2 and 8. And of course, they're the same lot numbers as the existing lots. So what I've done is asked the staff to call the new lots Lot A, B and C, which is the way the officers had referred to their ideas in the report. So it's just consistent with that, and it's the rest of the recommendations been tidied up to make sure there is no confusion between existing lots 1, 2 and 8 and how I had it. So apologise. There's a couple of little typos that were fixed up as well. So they are just slightly different. If we go back to the words, I guess. I don't think there's anything else I need to say.
You, Councillor Groom. No?
I
Seconder?
did not turn my microphone off. Same as not taking
Excellent.
your hand down on Teams. So
Okay.
I think I said
Goodo. Councillor Lang. No, she wants you to talk, please.
Okay. Just that green lot in the middle there, if we can get the diagram back up. I said a question on the reasoning behind having it skew off into lot C, and why it wouldn't punch straight through to the park. Is that a design thing? Because I'm thinking it's a design thing. Does that make it more difficult for the developer? Then if we are in, who owns lot A? If we own lot A, is that more management land for us, or do we assume that the owner of lot C will manage and maintain that little bit coming off the sides? I just wanted to clarify the logic behind that.
If you'll indulge the answer coming from me, yeah, look, that's where there's a bunch of trees, so there are some trees that we would probably like to keep there. There's also some remnant limestone walls in that location. I'm not quite sure exactly where they are, but it's also about flaring out the land a little bit, particularly in that where you throttle into that space, because the soccer pitch fills up a lot of that area, and assuming the soccer pitch is still there, it's just about creating a little bit more open space as you go into the link through, without actually utilising a massive amount of developable land. It won't. I don't think it will impact the way the developer responds to the land at all.
Did that help clarify? Did you wish to speak on the amendment at all? No. Right. Other speakers on the amendment? Councillor Archibald.
Yes, thank you. Look, I did go down to that site and walked the whole site, and walked back round Barnett Street and then back round Parry Street. And while, you know, if you had, to me, it's not a very big site. I mean, it's a reasonable chunk of land, and I kind of feel like, you know, the walkway or the roadway, whatever width there is on that, is, I kind of feel like I'd prefer just to put the whole block on the market and see what developers would do. And I just don't feel like it's that far to walk around one way or the other. And the walks are quite lovely. You go down Barnett Street or you go down Parry Street. The other bit I felt too was I went and had a look at the trees. I mean, there is one quite nice eucalyptus. Maybe it's a platypus or a lemani. I can't remember which one it was. But and then there's a few little, I think they're introduced tamarisks or whatever they call them. Some growing in North Fremantle near the National Storage site. So I don't know. I kind of feel like I'd rather go back to basics, leave the land, get it amalgamated, and put it on the market so we can see what a developer would do with it, rather than, I mean, a developer may decide that he can get a much more interesting configuration of housing there, and not have the walkway and still have some little pedestrian connection through it. So I just kind of feel like we've tried so many different things. I'd rather just go for one whole site, put it on the market, and see what happens.
Thanks, Councillor Archibald. Councillor Lang.
I wasn't going to speak on this, but I'm in favour of this proposal. Going back to, I think it was 2017, 2019, it was quite a while ago, that whole community there, for the other councils that aren't involved here, we had a significant series of pre-consultation consultation. That whole pocket came down to the old council building, and we wanted to understand what they wanted to see up on the site, and the access way was one of the key things that community group want to see in that park. So that's that whole neighbourhood there want to see that. And I'm raising that because, as Councillor Green touched on, this scenario allows us to secure and lock that in. And the second thing is, this scenario, it's also allowing the graduated rise from it's a really tough site because you've got heritage on both sides. And lot B, the purple one, that gives us the opportunity, or a developer the opportunity, to build something which is in appropriate scale to the heritage property next door. So rather than this coming back to us when the developer comes back and says they buy the whole thing and we get presented with this ginormous building, we're addressing those issues, design issues, right now with this proposal. So totally support this option to break up the land in this manner.
Councillor Moughlin.
Yeah, I'll be succinct. I don't support the amendment. I think it adds undue complexity and risk to what we're trying to achieve. And on the, I suppose, surveillance and safety front, down there on the weekend having a kick of a ball, I think the apartments there at the moment do certainly have a significant overview, and those lower level ones are pretty much ground level into the park. So I think there's reasonable surveillance there, and a new development would also bring that.
Thank you. Councillors, any further? So I had a question for officers, just in terms of if this amendment were to go ahead, what would be the process from here in terms of establishing a new reserve price? And do we have any expectations about what the new reserve price might be?
Through the chair, so if a decision was made to progress with the current option on the screen, we would get a valuation redone on this current option.
Any back of the envelope assumptions about what that might look like?
The option put up on the screen at the moment is the same or very similar to option B provided in the existing valuation, which as it stands would probably achieve a greater sales price than what we're currently already hoping for.
Cool, thank you. Anything further on that one? I've got to say I'm really line ball on this. Don't actually know how I'm going to vote. Anyway, let's carry on. There's really compelling arguments both ways, and it's tricky. Yes, add.
I'll just add one more note to that. That is if we sold lot A at the moment in total.
And you sold them together as into the same buyer?
The value achieved would be selling both of them.
Thank you. If you sold both. Thank you. That was helpful. Councillor Archibald, you're asking a question?
I was just sort of trying to clarify. The comment was made that we would make more from this model than from the model that we're looking at. Could I ask why we're looking at one model and not the other one?
Through the chair, because you're selling a smaller residential lot as part of this, you'd probably get a high per square metre rate and a high value on that lot. And that's where the increase in price is coming from predominantly.
So just to clarify, I guess that where we started out with a larger lot, the plan was that we would encourage multi-residential higher density. This way you're actually splitting off one section where you'd get a lower density, and that's the difference. Yeah.
So we're selling less land to make more money. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. Good. Are we ready to go to a vote on this one? So on the amendment? Oh no, closing.
I'll just quickly clarify that too, because if we were about making money, you would run a little street through the middle of this block, like Barnett Street, and you would put 4 lots on one side and 6 lots on the other side, and you'd make a mozza. But that doesn't meet our strategic imperatives.
Thank you. Are we ready to go to a vote on the amendment? All those in favour? I think I'm in favour now. And against? Councillors Graham, Archibald, Moughlin and Busick against. So the amendment is now carried. So back to the item as amended. Any further debate? Questions? Anything? No, gone. I'll put the item as amended to the vote. All those in favour? Yep. And against? Councillors Busick, Kamada and Graham against. So that is also carried. Off to market. Rightio. Yeah, I can. I'm going to go to the next item first, which is the Fremantle Boat and Seafood Festival, because we need to deal with that separately, because we've got to kick out Councillor Kamada, Senior Councillor Kamada, because of a conflict. Fishing boats, fishing festivals, that one. All right, so I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Any debate on this one? Nope. All right. All those in favour? That looks to be unanimous. A call against just in case. No. Let's test out the doorbell. I can't hear anything. All right. There you go. Yeah, he's probably taken the opportunity to just maybe don't follow him too far. Give him a minute. Can I? No, I can't do that. So we might go to cats. Councillor Graham, get excited. Oh, good Lord. Holy moly. Sorry, this is not for the entertainment of the gallery. We're just playing for time while Councillor Kamada comes back. All right, so I'm going to move the officer's recommendation on cat management amendment local law, seconded by somebody, I hope, Councillor Lang. Before we go to the amendment, it might just be useful to get officers to clarify what just happened. Is that a useful thing? And then we can go to Councillor Lang's amendment. So what the effectively the feedback we've had is, or do you want to speak to that? You've got to steal this.
So through the chair, the amendment, the recommendation that's up at the moment is the undertakings from the Joint Standing Committee. Essentially tonight you'll adopt that, and following that we'll have to amend the local law again to make those changes. So that's essentially what's happened.
Yep. Cool. So Councillor Lang, you wanted to move some amendments.
Thank you. So this is just housekeeping. So this is process from the government. It's come back to us. And on the back end of this, as teams mentioned, we've got to make some amendments. So I thought we may as well just put this on the back of it, which was the original officer recommendation from 6 months ago. I just thought this would piggyback on, so there's no extra work for the team. So we just run this through. It's not very exciting or inspiring from my perspective, but it's kind of, we're at a policy dead end. So this is just a very vanilla change. I'm sad to say.
So just to be clear, for those who may not have travelled this path before, this is the alternative that was up, I think, at the time when the proposal went forward to state government, which was just to expand the number of reserves on which cats are prohibited. Correct? Yeah. Okay. Anything further on the amendment? Oh, we do need a seconder. Councillor Archibald. Let's not debate the reserves, please. Any debate? No. I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? And that looks unanimous. No, is everyone against? Is there any against? No. Okay. So that's carried. Back to the item as amended. I'm going to assume there's no more debate. All those in favour? And those against? So that is carried with Councillor Busick against. Okay, good stuff. We might get through this agenda. Can I please go through audit and risk items, and can people tell me anything that they were planning to speak to or wanted voted on separately? Councillor Busick, which one did you want? Number 4 is out. And that's also, maybe if I can move the remainder of the audit and risk ones, so 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 and 8 on block. Seconded by Councillor Moughlin. All those in favour? That was good. Okay, I'll move the officer's recommendation for audit and risk 4, OAG actions, seconded by Councillor Graham. Councillor Busick, did you wish to speak or just vote separately?
I want to say something. I just want to say how disappointing and frustrating it is after 18 months that there are 4 items that are red flagged. Manual journals, purchase orders, timesheets and payroll certification, and WCC architectural service contract. And I would have thought when something is red flagged that that is telling us that we really need to take it seriously and make the changes in a very timely manner. 18 months later, we haven't closed off these red flag items. And I do find that really frustrating. And all I want to add to that is whenever anything goes wrong in a local government or a government agency where we've had untoward behaviour in terms of any fraudulent action, and we can have a look at the health department procurement in 2014-15. We only have to look at last year with the Department of Communities and so forth. They're exactly the areas where some of this untoward behaviour occurs. And yet we allow us to carry these red flags for 18 months or so without closing them out. Now, what does that say to our ratepayers in terms of our checks and balances?
Councillor Moughlin.
Yep. So for those who weren't at audit and risk, we had a really strong conversation in regards to this this particular item, and the response from officers and was at request of audit and risk at a previous meeting to be able to present the detailed actions to be able to close out those findings. So I acknowledge the comment that Councillor Busick's making in terms of the time frame around those actions, and that essentially was the sentiment a little while ago of Audit and Risk Committee, and hence why we've received this report of the detailed actions to be able to close those out. And I think at the time, or rather in the committee meeting, the action closeout dates were significantly improved compared to those that had been sitting on the register before. So in terms of checks and balances, I think Audit and Risk Committee has done a very good job to set the expectation to staff about what we expect and how these items are addressed, acknowledging that there have been challenges over the last 12 months to do so. And I think we are heading in the right direction. And again, it was part of the conversation that future findings have detailed actions associated with them and reasonable timeframes to close them out. So I'm looking forward to seeing us closing these ones and any future actions addressed in a similar fashion.
I just would like to clarify for the record that there's actually only 2 red flag items outstanding from the previous year, and the others that have been added to the list were just raised in the most recent audit, which was only kind of closed about 8 weeks ago. So I do share the concerns that we have a long list that we don't seem to be making progress on some of those items, but we are having very robust conversations, including putting it to staff that if we need extra resources, then council needs to know about that. But I think for the record, it's really critical that we note that there are only 2 items that date back to that period.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. You've just done the work that I was doing of trying to count up which ones date back to where. I'd also like to acknowledge that staff have done a much better job reporting, so I won't refer to the confidential attachments because they're confidential, but to say that there is actually better detailed explanations and they improve every single time we get them, and it is really appreciated that we can read the detail of what's going on, and we appreciate that this is being done in a time where staffing is super difficult and people have been under a heap of pressure. So you know, and I do also sort of commend the Audit and Risk Committee for the really detailed work they are doing as a committee to make sure that these things are on track and working constructively with staff to do that. If there's nothing further, I'll put this one to a vote. All those in favour? Thanks. That looks unanimous, I think. Yep. Good. Councillor Busick, if you want to turn your mic off. Thank you. Okay, so that gets us through audit and risk and into the C items. Just going to see if there's any here that I can I do 3, 4 and 6 on block? Anyone?
Not 3.
Not 3. 4 and 6. Anyone? 4 and 6 going. Okay, let's move 4 and 6 on block. Seconded by Councillor Archibald. All in favour? Yep, that's unanimous. I feel like I'm achieving something. All right, let's go back to the first C item, which is the acceptance of the minutes and motions from the AGM of electors. So I'll move the officer recommendation.
Can I just say something?
Well, we'll be in debate in a sec, so I might just get a seconder first. Okay, cool. Councillor Graham. Councillors. Yeah. Do you want to press?
I just want to say there was a couple of points not reflected in the minutes, and that was the 2 points relating to, and I know, and I do apologise, Melody, I said I was going to put it in an email to you, but when I looked at it, what was missing was the financial reporting, that it was not represented in its full representation, and also there was also a point coming across from one of the ratepayers saying that they did not receive the full financial report in a timely manner in the agenda and minutes section. I do think that needs to be recorded.
So are you moving an amendment?
Yes.
Have you drafted? Have we got a copy?
Oh. Sorry?
So if you want to amend the...
No, look, I don't want an amendment. I just want to make a point then.
Okay, cool. Do we want any officer comment on that point? CEO, if you want to comment on that point?
I think, as per usual, the minutes of any meeting are not a verbatim transition of that meeting. They are just a summary of the outcomes of the resolutions.
Okay. All right. So, anything further on this one? Nope. Let's put it to a vote. All those in favour? Yep. And against? Councillor Vusick against. That's carried. Okay. Local government reform. Move the officer's recommendation, noting that there has been an amendment made to attachment 1 and that's been reissued in the additional docs, and seconded by somebody, Councillor Archibald. I feel like we've done quite a lot of discussion on this one. Would anyone else like to say something about it? Councillor Lorber.
Thank you. So I appreciate all the work that staff has done on this. It's been quite a task. Looks like we're going to be throwing out dozens of options for public comment on this. You know, I mentioned this when we were kind of discussing this informally, that I'm a huge fan of not putting up a lot of barriers for people to run for council, because we are a local government, and the bigger the boundaries of the wards and the more people that are in them, if we do wind up with wards, I think creates barriers for some people who may decide to run or not to run based on that. And one of the ideas of having potentially 8 wards with 8 councillors was not really, was not really put forward because of how do we decide which wards were up in what election year. But I do note in the positions that we're going to be putting out for public comment, there are options for 6 wards with 1 councillor each and 4 wards with 1 councillor each. So if the barrier was that, then I think that it would be great if we could somehow work in one more tiny little option of the dozens that would include 8 wards with 1 councillor each. Because if we're going to canvass all of this, we might as well have a full slate of options. So if that work possibly could be done, it would be great. But because having 8 wards would also make those boundaries in areas smaller, which would, in essence, allow more people to potentially put their hand up from a smaller community. So just wanted to make that comment.
I mean, unless it's an amendment, we're approving this to go out to advertising on a pretty tight deadline. So
I don't have any maps prepared that would have 8 wards on it. I don't think we can actually, if we could just put it in there as just a written option, but no.
I can make a quick comment. I guess officers just didn't have time to see if we could put some wards together that would do that naturally. So we've put together what we think we're ready to put out to the community. It can certainly be a discussion. We can look at it again over the next day, but I doubt whether we'll achieve it in the next day either. But it's something we can discuss before we wrap up in January, if that's what council want, and we can work on it for the next 2 months and see if we can put an option up that can be considered in the final wrap up.
And perhaps can I ask the question that does the consultation give the opportunity for other options to be proposed? Yeah. Okay. Does, so yes. Easy done. All right, councillors, other discussion on this? We're getting cheerful, but Councillor Jones.
Well, I just thought I had questions too, but I thought that the way to resolve it is to put in a submission to the consultation process. Do we have any information as to whether you could have 8 wards and only 4 of them go to an election every 4 years? Or I thought each ward had to be treated equally and things like that. Do we know if that's possible?
To be fair, no, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I'd have to check. It's not been something I've come across before.
Well, if it comes up in the consultation, I'm sure that's something officers will have to check out. Further discussion on this one? Nope. All right, let's put it to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Let's go to consultation. Statement of investments. I'll move the officers. No, what? Hey. C3. Didn't I just do that? No. Bloody hell. Yep, you're right. Councillor Graham wanted to talk about C3. So I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded superannuation, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Graham, you wish to speak?
Oh, just briefly, yeah, I don't support it. I don't think as elected members we should be getting paid superannuation. I think we're well reimbursed as it is, and if we want to put some of our hard-earned money into a private superannuation fund, it should come out of what we actually get remunerated for at the moment. And I just think it's going to add an extra cost to local governments, and you're heading down I can see the pathway they're heading down, which I won't go into now, but I'm not a great fan of it, so I won't be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Vusic.
Yes, I won't be supporting it simply because we, as a local government community, we need to keep the spirit of representing the community. If we go down the path of superannuation, we go down the path of an employee, we just edge that a little bit closer to becoming an employee. And there is a distinct difference between an employee and an elected member. I think we'll lose our independence and that variety of discussion and opinions that individuals bring to the chamber. So I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Archibald.
Sorry, yes, it's getting late. This is very brief, but I just had to reflect that once upon a time, and a couple of my colleagues across the table will remember this, councillors didn't get paid, and the mayor didn't get paid either. The mayor got a very modest allowance and a car, and I think the local government's come a long way. And the fact that you get superannuation, well, I just feel like it's a standardising of the industry. It's nothing to do with us in particular, and I think that with payments to local members that are appropriate given the times we live in is fine. So I fully support the recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Archibald. Councillors, any further discussion on this one? Councillor Lorber looks like. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pemberton actually got the call there. Sorry.
Thanks. That's right. I will just chip in briefly. One thing that when I first started, we were paid $7,000 a year, which was, not to be laughed at, but not much. But it was really unusual for people of sort of young working age or people with young families and so on to be on council. It actually becomes a massive barrier because if you do the job right, it does actually take quite a bit of time. And now I think it gets paid at a rate that's a pretty fair part-time job, and it does mean that you can dedicate the hours that are necessary while not going financially significantly backward. And what we used to see was councils across the board dominated by retirees because they were the only ones who could afford to do it, or people with a self-interest, and that kind of it therefore embeds the incentive almost to take advantage of the position because it's not treated as a professional role. And so I don't have strong feelings about this, but I think making sure that we attract high quality people to council is really important.
Councillor Lorber.
I was just going to say many of the same comments as Councillor Pemberton just said, that encouraging that the council is reflective of the community is important, and that's getting back to not having barriers for folks who may want to put their hand up and then actually serve. Having superannuation, it could be that one thing where a younger person mostly who is just getting started in their career might tip them to say, yeah, I'll give it a go versus not. And I think it'll be a good thing because it'll attract more people to put their hand up, more people to run, and we'll have continue to have a good reflection of our community on this council.
Thanks. Now, all I'll add to that is that there's a massive superannuation gap often for women, and one of the key things that we want to do is ensure that everyone can run for council, but we already know that superannuation gap is there, so we shouldn't be seeking to exacerbate that by encouraging service on council. I believe actually superannuation is paid for a whole bunch of things like zone membership, zone payments. I don't know, Councillor Thompson needs to tell me here, but JDAP, pretty much everything else we do, they pay super, so it's a bit of a weird anomaly. All right, I'll put this one to the vote. All those in favour? Yep, and against, Councillors Vusic and Graham against. That's carried. Right, now I think we are where I think we are. Statement of investments. Yeah, so I'm happy to do that actually. So I'm going to move it with Councillor Moughlin's amendment with his indulgence, just to speed things along. Would you like to second it? You could even move it. Yeah, good. All right. Do you want to speak a little to the amendment there?
Yeah, apologies. I don't have the reasons there, but I think it's relatively self-explanatory as to why the amendment was included. But the report showed that we had put $3 million of investment into a Tier 4 institution where the policy states that it was only one, should only be $1 million max. And I suppose in terms of the level of rigour that we're bringing through audit and risk, I thought it prudent that we have an action for staff to have a look at that and come back and report to us and say how it would be prevented in the future from occurring.
Councillor Graham.
Yeah, so you can imagine I was disappointed to read this in the report, and also surprised. I am going to note that this wasn't raised with audit and risk last week, because I imagine that staff were aware of it. So I think that's a slap on the wrist. This is the second time in the last few years that a large payment's been made and we've been told it's a system error or a staff error or a training issue error, and I'm referring to the design contract for Wallup that should have been, the variation should have been approved by council. It's beyond belief for me that we can make a $3 million deposit and that not get approved by the CEO. So I don't know what's happened here, but this looks like a pretty mild statement, and I agree with the way it's been worded, but I think council really need to kind of stress to staff that we need to get this sorted out, and we don't want to see it again.
Thanks, Councillor Graham, and well said. Put this one to a vote, so moving the amended item. All those in favour? And that looks like it's unanimous. Okay, which leaves us with Councillor Lang's notice of motion. Did you want to move that? And seconded by, I'm happy to second it, Councillor Lang.
I think most people were actually here last week when this all went down. Those of you that weren't here, I was approached by members of our community to bring this motion through, following the footsteps of a handful of councils around Australia and other councils or countries around the world, in fact, that are moving in this direction to look at banning fossil fuel advertising. It's obviously been in the media a little bit, this and other pieces across the last couple of weeks. In total in Australia, there's 7 councils that have voted to investigate a ban on fossil fuels. And the key points that I want to make is that this single action by us won't stop climate change. No individual action will. Climate change is minimised by multiple actions by everyone across the globe. So I think as we as a globe are transitioning away from fossil fuels, I think this is completely reasonable to start transitioning away from promoting companies whose core revenue is fossil fuels. We all know that last summer in Perth was the hottest summer on record ever that we've experienced, and the science suggests it's only going to get hotter and hotter each summer we go through. So this is merely an investigation, and I would encourage our city to start our investigation on what a ban on fossil fuel advertising may look like. That's just for those of you who weren't here. That's the very short bit.
Thanks, Councillor Lang. Any further discussion on this one? Councillor Graham?
Oh, look, I'll put my spin on this one. Look, I understand. Look, the whole world's green. We're just different shades. But I bring this down to the local government level. Now, let Albanese and all the others fight all these big companies about emission trading and blah, blah, blah. But at local government level, and I've been a member of sporting clubs all my life. I've been on committees. I still am on committees. And the biggest thing with a local sporting club is raising funds. Now, we all charge fees and all this, and we have sausage sizzles, and we do all the great things that we do, and it's all down to volunteers, and it's fantastic. But and I'll use Woodside as an example, if they were to go to the Fremantle City Soccer Club and say, look, I'll give you $5,000 to support a junior program for boys and girls. We just want one sign up there in the corner of Gibson Park. I'd put my hand up 11 times out of 10 for that to happen, because that is $5,000 that that club is not going to come back one day to the council. Because what happens at local sporting club levels, and I'm talking the local, you know, even the bowling club, and there's problems down there, as you know. The first port of call is the council. When it really hits the fan, you know, and you've got all the big gurus in that are qualified accountants and are up there in Highwood, the money doesn't grow on trees, so that they come to this council for funding. And so that's my point. I mean, we don't want to cut off our nose. I understand all the, you know, fossil fuel stuff, but gee whiz, you know, if we can get, not saying that we're going to get Woodside walking in, but if it did happen, I mean, we'd be fools to knock it back. And so there you go. That's my spin. My last spin of the night.
Thanks. Councillor Easting.
Okay, I'm not going to go through all of this bill that I did on F Paul, but I will go through some of the major points. I don't see a separation between climate change and the environment. That's like saying I like my right hand better than my left hand and I can do one without the other. Or consider that I could live happily without having both my left and my right arm. I think whenever an argument is so one-sided and that there is a loss of balance of the pros and cons, we get into an ideology and we crucify anybody else that might have a different point of view. I think I would defy anybody to debate that over the last 100 years we have not enjoyed the most abundant standard of living in over the last 100 years, which has been the result of the average working class person having access to cheap fuel, cheap and reliable source of energy. It's transformed our lives in every way you want to have a look at it. I think to say that you know, one, climate change is, if we go into green energy, it's going to be a free lunch. It's not. And I went through some stats for you. As I said, wind farms and solar farms are not free. They kill birds and animals on a very large scale. In terms of building wind farms, you know, consider 80 tonnes of steel and 1,400.
Can you bring it back to the recommended item?
I'm just giving you my point of view on why I'm not going to be supporting it.
I'm struggling to tie this to wind farms, but carry on.
Of course you do. As I said before I was so rudely interrupted, why I consider this motion and why I will not be voting for it. It needs to be a balanced point of view, and I am giving you a preamble to that. So, basically, coming to, like I said, I'm not going to go through all of the detail. I think one other component in terms of electric vehicles, the terrible mining effects in third world countries of mining the rare earth minerals, the lithium, the cobalt and the graphite and others. I think fossil fuel companies are transitioning. I think every company has invested billions into alternative green energy, and that transition is taking place as we speak. Are we going to ban Orange Sky, who has partnered with Woodside from the City of Fremantle or areas where City of Fremantle have property? It's worth the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to talk more specifically with what we'll actually be doing by bringing this in. Last week at FPOL, I did support this motion with some reservations. However, having had time to think about the motion since last 2 weeks ago, lots happened, as Councillor Lang has pointed out. And I'm concerned about how such restrictions would be policed and where you would draw the line. In fact, I think it could get pretty messy. And while I appreciate the intent, I feel that we probably should steer clear. The city has a clear climate emergency position statement that clearly states its position. I feel that the sporting clubs and associations are capable of making their own decisions on this matter. It's their choice who they partner with, and the supporters will vote with their feet. So when we say, do we go a step further and look at fast food, soft drinks, alcohol, gambling, advertising, knowing the damage that these industries have done to people's lives? If anything, I believe that fuel companies should be putting more money back into the community. They should be investing in renewables and advertising ways to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, in doing so reducing carbon footprints. Unfortunately, we can't just flick a switch, so it's going to take a collaborative effort to get to where we need to get to at present. We can't rely on renewables. Finally, I question the practicality of directing our officers to spend time investigating and reporting when they have so much on their plates already. Instead, I'd rather than banning the advertising of fossil fuel companies, I would be encouraging advertising steps that are outlined in the city's action on climate change strategy that advocate carbon footprint reduction. So I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Groom.
I'll keep it very short. But in my lifetime, I've seen this debate play out twice. We used to sponsor cricket with cigarette companies, and we've seen that advertising disappear, and we've still got cricket games. I used to watch State of Origin, and all the rugby players wore the name of booze companies, and that's disappeared, been replaced by others. There's plenty of people in the world who are wanting to sponsor and get their kind of their brand out there, and our sport doesn't disappear when we take stances about this. But and we're not even saying in this motion that that's the impact it's going to have. We're asking our staff to help us understand how we can reduce the advertising of gas companies in particular, but oil and gas in our community. And, we would still be looking at Benson and Hedges and various grog brands on other sporting uniforms. If this step hadn't been taken, we would have to watch betting advertising during sports games in Western Australia if our state government hadn't stood up and said that's not okay. So putting a ban on some types of advertising doesn't bring the world to its knees, but it does start really important conversations. So I thank Aidan for bringing the motion, and I'll be supporting it.
Thanks. Councillor Lorber.
Thank you. I'll be really, really brief. I just wanted to echo the comments of Councillor Kamara and Councillor Grimm that this what's before us actually doesn't make any decision one way or the other. It's just to get information before us so that way we could potentially make a decision. But we already kind of do. And what this, if it comes back, it would just ban advertising on the property, so the signs, right? That's and what these bans have done in other areas. So we don't call this place the Chevron Civic Center, but we could probably get a couple $1 million if we did. But I'm sure there was a decision that we weren't going to do that. So to me, it makes perfect sense to look at what the impact this might be and then get that information before so we can make a decision on this later. I think it's brilliantly put forward, and I thank Councillor Lang for doing so.
And I was going to say more or less the same thing, but you've done it very well, so I shan't, and I shall let us be released. Councillor Lang, did you want to close? All right, so I'll put this motion to a vote. All those in favour and against? So Councillors Kamada, Graham and Vusic against, so that's carried. And I believe that brings us to the end of the meeting. Goodness me. I will declare the meeting closed at 9:40 according to real time. And